Hey everyone. Well, this is a little bit off the cuff, a little bit unplanned. I did have a guest lined up to have a discussion about. They supposedly had a mathematical proof that AI was going to destroy all humans. Kind of interesting. So I was gonna have him on, but I guess somewhat ironically, he's having internet connectivity issues. So I don't know if the AI is trying to take him out or what. He has the link if he can get that sorted. I've also sent the link out to a few creationists to see if any of them will come out of the woodwork and offer up any kind of challenge. That's also I'll put the link here in chat as well for anyone that wants to join the conversation. But there's still plenty to talk about without AI guy. So we'll see if we can get a good discussion going regardless. For those of you that have missed some of my debates, most recently I was in the open mic for the genetic entropy panel on Standing for Truth. That was a ton of fun. I know a lot of people don't like watching Standing for Truth's video. I was debating whether or not to upload my specific clip from it because I really only got to talk for maybe like 10 minutes. I had a 10-minute conversation with Paul Price, who I've debated before. That video is on my channel. And then after 10 minutes, he told Donnie, I don't think we should keep talking to Grayson. Let's move on to the next guy. So I wasn't sure if like a 10-minute conversation that was very dependent on the context of the previous other speakers was really worth getting into. But it was a really, really fun discussion overall. I mean, Paul just got annihilated. Like it was like every single person who joined that open mic tore such a big hole in genetic entropy. Shout out to Zach Hancock in the chat here. He did a great job as well. Zach, let us know if you're going to be uploading your segment of that onto your channel. Because if not, I mean, I definitely think that video needs to get to more channels than just on Standing for Truths. Um, so someone will upload it. I mean, Dr. Dan was there. Erica Gets It Gibbon was in the chat. Um, Tons of people all joined and I mean pointed out so many fatal flaws in genetic entropy. I mean, it's hilarious that creationists still think that genetic entropy is a real thing. It's super, super easily discredited. Zach had a mathematical demonstration to mathematically show that it was debunkable extremely easily. But, you know, drift and selection pretty much tell the whole story there. Not really that concerning. Lately, I've had a new question, so I don't know if there's any creationists in the chat yet, but I have had a new question that I've been asking a few of the creationists I know. So far, I haven't heard a single response back to this. So if you know any creationists, ask them. Let me know what they say to this, because I think it's a pretty good point to bring up at least, which is, you know, they might, most creationists would disagree with radiometric dating, right? But interestingly enough, I've been asking them, why do you think that we don't have anything that radiometrically dates to more than 4.6 billion years old? Why do we not find stuff that we can radiometrically date to 7 billion years old? Right? I mean, if they think that radiometric dating has absolutely nothing to do with the passage of time, then why can't we just find radiometric dates, as in, proportions of isotopes? Why can't we find them for 7 billion years old, 9 billion years old? Why don't our radiometric dates all seem to converge to about 4.56 billion years? Why is it that the very oldest radiometric dates that we get all converge to be that age? I've never heard a creationist offer any explanation for this. I've been asking. I would love to hear what they think about that. Um, Zach says he won't be uploading his portion because most of it was just Paul not understanding what fitness means. This is true. Basically, Paul and every creationist that tries to argue genetic entropy really only gets by trying to redefine what things are. like Sal Cordova is pretty infamous for trying to redefine fitness. They try to redefine what a neutral mutation is. They think, oh, we can throw away all the math in population genetics if we just redefine what words mean. And that seems to be a huge creationist strategy, is to just redefine the meaning of words. This is what they do with macro evolution and kinds. It's actually a very, very common creationist strategy now that I'm thinking about it. It's just if math and science disagree with you, just redefine what words mean so that you can just redefine and play little rhetorical games to get your way out of it. Here, Big Bad Mama, welcome to the chat. Creationists say the word assumptions and think that's an answer to radiometric dating. Yeah, but I've never heard any creationists have a good comeback to when you literally say, let's look at the assumptions for different types of radiometric dating, like using oxygen isotopes or carbon isotopes or uranium isotopes, and see that the assumptions involved are different for each of the different subcategories of radiometric dating. So it's weird that with independent assumptions that don't depend on each other, that we would get corroborating dates when we use different methods. Redefining words. There's a famous creationist, redefined living, which is pretty funny. That, he literally is just redefining things. They never define what information means. That's a big one. They're always talking about, specified information. Here, let me just go ahead and pin this link here. So the link to join the StreamYard. Again, for those of you that are just showing up, the person who was going to be the interlocutor for tonight was having connectivity issues and wasn't able to join the debate. So if anyone out there, creationist, wants to enter the ring, go ahead. I've thrown down the gauntlet. I've issued the challenge. If you're out there, please do come join, throw your hat in the ring. Let's see. James Apperson, welcome. They say they do the same thing with meanings of all words: love, justice, good, bad. That's another big one. Yeah. Perfect, all those things. The answer will probably be demons. Good to see you, Captive Desk. Maybe there's a demon that's messing with the radioactive decay rates of things. That's pretty good. They always say that you assume that things radiometrically decay at the same rate in the past than now, and that's just a baseless assumption. But no, we can literally calculate the decay rates from more fundamental physics. And if you were going to change those decay rates to just be willy-nilly whatever you want, then you'd have to change a whole lot about fundamental physics that could potentially break the universe. So unless you want to start messing with the fundamental qualities of quantum mechanics, probably not going to have much of luck changing decay rates. Or, they point out, well, if you just add a bunch of energy, you can make these radiometric decay rates speed up. And it's like, just take a second and think about what you're saying. What would involve all this energy? How hot would the Earth have to be? And then you decide, it would melt the Earth. Okay. So then that's thrown out too. So really, I've never heard. I mean, I've had lots of debates with creationists. They try to bring up points, trying to debunk radiometric dating. But just the fact that all the oldest radiometric dates consistently point to 4.56 billion years, and we don't find any dates that are older than that. I mean, how can a creationist possibly explain that? Wait, show me the 7 billion year dating for a radiometric sample. Okay. They really do like to redefine what science is. That's another favorite, science to know. They commit, that was a Mike Kent Hovind impression, but they commit what's called the etymological fallacy, where they confuse the etymology of a word with its meaning, which happens all the time. It's like almost every conversation a creationist will inevitably do this. Big Bad Mama saying that the creationists throw out the entire fossil record, the geologic column, radiometric dating, and phylogenetics, so we don't have to deal with them. Yeah, true. Andrew, the topic was going to be a debate about whether or not AI will inevitably destroy all humans. But the person that wanted to have that discussion had some internet connectivity issues. So I figured, F it. I would just do an open mic debate for anyone that wants to join. But so far, none of the creationists are coming out of the woodwork. Jungle Jargon, pretty infamous on this channel, also said that he was interested in having a debate about ancient civilizations, because he says that there are 16 ancient civilizations that correspond to the 16 haplogroups. So kind of completely arbitrary. There's a lot more haplogroups than 16, and there's a lot more ancient civilizations that are 16, but he somehow thinks that it can all be traced to Noah's flood. So here's another one from Tyler. Yes, they all want to break the speed of light. Yeah, they all think that the speed of light is just totally arbitrary, and it can be whatever you wish it to be. Pretty good, pretty easily debunked. Hey, Caterpillar, bugs, they're pretty awesome. Go ahead and drop what your favorite bug is in the comments, everybody. I'd be interested to know. I think my favorite bug would be dragonflies, because they're like the fighter jets of bugs, and like 70% of their brains is just like visual information processing, which is pretty cool. But yeah, it's oh man, these creationists, they talk all this big game. You always have keyboard warriors always talking all this in the chat, and then when you throw down the gauntlet, say, okay, let's actually have a discussion with this, suddenly you get crickets. I don't know where all these creationists that will actually engage on these topics go. I mean, lots of people ask me why I do so many debates on Standing for Truth channel. That's because no creationists will have debates outside of it, at least not the ones I've found. Every time I find a creationist that's willing to have a debate, they always say, okay, well, we need a moderator, so let's go to Standing for Truth channel. So it's like, yeah, I don't seem to find any of the brave creationists that are willing to just have a normal grown-up conversation between two people. They always want to be, okay, well, you speak for 15 minutes and then I have a 10-minute rebuttal, and then like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you guys like the formal debate structure, but I don't really like giving speeches that much. I don't really like having to, yeah. Yeah. Okay, we could get Redefined Living in here. I'm sure that he would love to join. He's everyone knows we're best friends. Yeah, if you say SOT's name 3 times, he'll show up. Well, he has been dodging me. I've been asking him, hey, how come we don't ever find radiometric samples that date older than 4.56 billion years? Why do all the oldest samples all converge on a date of 4.56 billion years? Why don't we find 8 billion year old dated samples? He's been dodging that. I've asked him 3 times now, and he's dodged it 3 times. Wax Paper asks, what is the best argument creationists have, in your opinion? Ooh, I mean, asking me to steel man creationism is really quite difficult, because I really don't think that they have very many good arguments at all. And I can't even think of one that I think is even challenging, like even that requires much thought to debunk. I don't know. Maybe if you guys have something in the comments that you think is an actual good creationist argument, maybe we can talk about it. Let me know what you think of, as in terms of like, sometimes creationists will bring this up and I just don't know how to respond. Then, oh, here we go. Hey, Jungle Jargon.
Hello, how you doing? Sorry about my picture. It's not showing up.
Oh, I don't really mind. That's fine. So thank you for having the cojones to join this open mic debate. No other creationist had the stones to join, so kudos to you for that.
Well, we sometimes say the same thing about you guys, but that's
yeah. Well, I'm always down to join a good spirited discussion on these topics. So you wanted to talk about ancient civilizations, correct?
Yeah, yeah, ancient civilizations. Yeah. Are you there? Am I coming through?
Yeah, you're coming through just fine.
Oh, okay.
And we also had John just joined. He was the one who originally wanted to talk about AI, but was having connectivity issues. John, can you hear us at all? I will take that as a no, but take all the time you want, John. I'll just be talking with Jungle here for a bit. So, Jungle, what did you want to talk about ancient civilizations specifically? I imagine that you think that they prove creationism or the Bible.
Yeah, they basically proved the global flood, that we all came from the 16 grandsons of Noah, considering that they have a lot of them, most of them have the same exact names as their ancestor.
Could you be a little bit more specific about what you mean by that? I mean, ones in South America, for example, don't really have Semitic names.
Yeah, but they're not just Semitic. They're everybody. Assyrian is Semitic. You know Assyrian, right?
Yep.
Yeah, they're descended from Asher. Their god is Asher.
I mean, they have multiple gods, right? They've got a lot of gods and goddesses.
Well, if you know anything about the ancient civilization, especially Assyria, their god is Asher. And
well, like I just said, they don't just have one god. Each city in Assyria had their own page of gods, and in the Assyrian capital of Asher, there were 30 temples to 30 different Mesopotamian gods.
Right, but their basic god, their angel god, is Asher, which is the ancestor. It's like an ancestor, because the ancestor is responsible for their existence.
Well, just so you know, Assyria is not really the most ancient by any means in that region. Like, Assyria came significantly after Sumeria.
Well, it's a little bit complicated because the Bible identifies Assyria and Nimrod together. So Assyria was basically the Sumerians ruled by the ruling class of Nimrod.
So why don't we have any evidence for that? Like, for example, we have the names of pretty much all the Assyrian kings and the Sumerian kings list, and Nimrod is not one of them.
It doesn't matter. Nimrod is the original founder, and of course the Assyrians wouldn't probably recognize Nimrod because that's a Hamitic genealogy.
So why is it that the name Nimrod never once shows up in any Assyrian text?
Well, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't. I mean, it's just one of the names of the people of the.
But a lot of names do show up in Assyrian text. We have a ton of Assyrian kings' names, and we know who they attributed to as being the great kings before Assyria, namely Sargon.
Well,
they were still talking about Sargon of Akkad like 1,000 years later in Assyria.
Well,
and
maybe
they're never talking about Nimrod at all.
Well, maybe it was Sargon, but before you discount it, that's only one. That's only one of the tribes.
Okay, and we have C Science, who just joined us. The only person I have blocked on YouTube. A fun fact. So, welcome, C Science, my good buddy.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you, John.
Hey, what's up?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if C Science is there or not, but he's still on mute.
Well,
I mean, not muted him.
I mean, as far as the names, you know about the Canaanites and the Elamites and the Arameans. They're all names of the grandsons of Noah too.
Well, those are all real tribes.
Cushites,
people.
Cushites.
Sure, like Cushites, Arameans, Elamites, Canaanites. Those are all real groups of people. But where's the evidence that they're all descendants of Noah?
But like I said, the Cushites are descended from Cush. The Arameans are descended from Aram. The Elamites are descended from Elam, and the Lydians are descended from Lud. The
what is the evidence for that?
well, the evidence is that the Bible outlines the 16 ancient civilizations before they became civilizations.
Okay, so but what is the evidence for that? Because there's a lot more
It's
than
a
just 16 ancient civilizations,
it's
right?
a it's a written historical record of the 16 grandsons of Noah before they became the ancient civilizations.
Did you have like do you have a list of these 16 or something that you could share?
Absolutely,
Because there
absolutely.
seems like there's a lot more than just 16 ancient civilizations.
No, well, I mean, can you name any of the others?
Well, I don't know which
The
16 are
original.
on
I'm
your list.
talking about. I'm talking about the original ones. Can you
Okay,
name any
okay,
other
okay.
ones?
Norte Chico. Where is that on your list?
Norte Chico. That's not an original
It,
civilization.
it is it is as old
You
as the
know,
ancient Egyptians and Sumerians in
but
3000 BC.
but do you know why? Because we have the Y chromosomes of everybody, and the
Uh-huh.
Y chromosomes match up with the 16 grandsons of Noah.
You know that there's over 20 Y chromosomal haplogroups. There's a lot more than 16, right?
Oh, there's not so many. A couple of them are doubled up.
But there
There's
are
not
more than 16
no
Y chromosomal haplogroups.
there's not that many, but two of them belong to, like, one belongs to Nimrod, the other one belongs to a Sinite tribe, a Canaanite tribe called Sinim, which gave the China the name of Sino, Sinim.
Okay, well, you know that the name China comes from Qin Shi Huang, the first Chinese emperor of the Qin dynasty.
Yeah, that would be a descendant of Magog, who displaced the original Sinites.
Uh, okay, so do you have any evidence that that happened?
And the Y chromosome is what I'm telling you about. The D haplogroup Y chromosome is a hamitic Y chromosome haplogroup that's compatible with the E2, which would be the Canaanite, all the Canaanite descendants.
So then my question would be, why do all the non-African haplogroups rest within the African haplogroups? Why would that be the case if what you're saying is true?
Because the Nimrod is the son of Cush, who is the father of the Cushites, and the Sinite tribe is a Sinite tribe that's a Canaanite tribe.
I don't think that that answers the question I just asked you. Why is it that the haplogroups outside of Africa, why do they all nest within, as in coming from African haplogroups? Why is it that we observe that?
Because they're descended from African groups. I'm trying to explain to you.
Okay.
Nimrod is the son of Cush, and the Sinite tribe is a Canaanite tribe, which is they're both Hamitic.
Okay, so Hamitic is African.
Yeah.
So all the people in the world are descendant from Ham?
Shem and Japheth. Japheth is the oldest one. Shem is
So
the middle one.
then why
And
would
Ham is the youngest. You know Ham is the youngest, right?
so then what you just said is in contradiction to what you said before, because you're saying now that
No,
there
you
are
understood.
you're saying now that there are other non-Ham descendants, but I'm showing you that all the non-African haplogroups nest within the African haplogroups.
No,
So
no,
there's a
Ham.
contradiction there with
No,
what
that's
you're saying.
not. See, that's not possible because I'm trying to explain to you that Ham was the youngest son, so he doesn't have Ham doesn't have the most original Y chromosome haplogroup.
So
The-
then why is it that in reality all of these Y
no,
haplogroups nest within
no,
ancestral African haplogroups?
because it's not the reality. The reality is that you have to root the tree in the oldest son, which is the most original genome, and the oldest genome, so that which would be Japheth. So you have to root the tree in K, which is everything under
Okay.
K is the descendant of Japheth.
Let me see if we can get an agreement on this, right? If what you're saying is true, then we should be able to see those results without any knowledge of the Bible, right? If what you're saying is accurate, then we should be able to just look at the DNA
Well,
and what the Bible says should emerge out of our study of just the DNA.
No, not if your assumption is that Ham is the oldest one. Ham is the youngest one.
I'm saying without any knowledge of the Bible. So we don't know Ham, we don't know Japheth, we don't know Shem, we don't know any of that. If we go in with a completely blank slate and all we have is the DNA to look at.
But you would admit that the assumption is that the African is the oldest genome. You admit that's the assumption, right?
No, it's not assumed. It is observed in the data. We can observe that to be the case because
they made the data fit their assumption. Because instead of, I can explain it to you if you listen.
I can explain it to you if you listen, but okay.
Instead of gaining an S&P marker, going from, if you look at it straight on the page, going from left to right, instead of gaining an S&P marker, the reality is that you're losing an S&P marker going from right to left, from the K group to the F group to the A and the B and the C and the D and the E group. The D, A, B, C, D, and E is the last group, which is the youngest group.
Okay, so just for a little history lesson here, the original scientists, like the biologists, were very Eurocentric. They were very against the idea that humanity started in Africa. They did not want that to be the case. And that was proven to be I don't believe that.
I don't believe that. I mean, if you believe...
I tried not to interrupt you. So let me just get this. Let me just finish this thought, okay? The scientists did not want an origin for humanity in Africa because they were super racist at the time. And it was only because the evidence suggested that to be the case, especially the genetic evidence, that it was then they had to finally begrudgingly admit that that is the reality.
Well, maybe the majority of scientists, maybe, but the ones doing the work were trying to prove an out of Africa belief, which would require Ham to be the oldest son. And Ham is not the oldest son.
All right, but again, if what you're saying is true, right? We shouldn't need to make any assumptions about Ham or Shem or Noah or any of that. We should be able to look at just the DNA alone, and we should be able to figure out if they're all descendant from the same three guys.
But it's gonna work out just as good the other way, because instead of gaining an S&P, you know what an S&P marker is, right?
Yes, a single nucleotide polymorphism.
But an S&P marker is what ties the Africans to the Semitic population, and then there's an S&P marker that ties the Semitic population to the Eurasian population. Now, there's a problem with that because it can be resolved, and I can explain it because of the Cohen-Model haplotype. Are you familiar with the Cohen-Model haplotype?
Why don't you go ahead and explain it? You can share your screen if you would like.
No, I'm in the jungle, and I'm in the woods right now, and I can't share the screen.
Well, you have remarkably better reception than John for being just out in the woods. So
yeah, I don't know why the picture's not showing up. I could try again, but anyways, the Cohen-Model haplotype is when they tested all the people claiming to be descendants of Moses' brother Aaron. So they tested all the people claiming to be descendants, and they found a marker in common, and there was a spike on a specific haplotype, and that haplotype is J1P58. It was something like almost 50% of the people claiming to be descended from Aaron had that marker of J1P58. So that identified what they call the Cohen-Model haplotype, which is a J1 marker. Now, then there's a J2. The majority of the Jewish population is J2, which would be Judaic, but the descendants of Aaron are not descended from Judah. They're descended from Levi, so it's a totally different branch, which is, you can hardly tell the difference. At least I can hardly tell the difference right now between the Israelites and Arabs, because they're all descended from Abraham. They're all J1. But if you study, I mean, there's people I'm sure there's people that study it more than I have, that could differentiate between Arabs and Jews. But well, the Jews are J2, especially the J2 M172, which is probably all the descendants of David and King Solomon of the house of
Okay.
David,
Okay.
which is of the tribe of Judah. So you have the I and the J, which is in common with the I and the J have what's called an IJK S&P marker. So
Okay, Jungle, we're gonna digest what you just said, because you were talking for quite a while there. We're gonna digest what you said, and I'm gonna welcome Dr. Chris Thompson and Trevor. So, Dr. Thompson, are you there? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
How's
Welcome
it going?
to the stream. Any thoughts about what we've been talking about so far?
A little bit. I only caught like the last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So, okay. Jungle, can I call you Jungle?
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So one thing I'm kind of confused about is what difference does it make if Ham, Shem, or Japheth is the youngest or oldest? If we're talking about Y chromosome haplotypes, aren't they all essentially the same for the brothers, right? They all inherited the Y chromosome from Noah, didn't they?
Yeah, but one is going to be older, has the most original markers.
But it's identical. They have the same father.
Yeah, they have the same father, but the oldest one is going to have the most original. Then the middle one is going to have markers that are different.
No,
Especially
they're going to be identical.
Especially the sons of Shem or the Semitic sons all have different markers. Each one of them has a different every single group has their own markers.
Yeah, that's true. But if we're talking about the offspring of one father, all three children should have the same Y chromosome.
Yeah, well, but what the thing is, we're talking about not just the three sons of Noah. We're talking about the 16 grandsons of Noah, which all have different markers.
Okay, how did they get different markers?
Because they were born at different times.
Yeah, you don't get different mutations because you're born at different times. That's how that works.
If you're born later, you're going to have mutations that the earlier generations didn't have.
Why do you think that?
Well, it's an S&P marker. It's a marker that identifies the lineage.
Hey, do you have any brothers, Jungle?
Are you? I mean, do you want to listen, or do you just want to make excuses?
I don't want to do either. I was asking if you had any brothers because I was curious if you think that your Y chromosome is unique as compared with your brothers.
Well, everyone's Y chromosome is unique because everyone has mutations. Either the father has a mutation and gives it to you, or you have your own mutation.
Sure. But these mutations are relatively minor. Right, there's only going to be a handful from generation to generation. Well, it doesn't matter if like a brother is older than the other brother. They're going to have probably the same number of mutations.
Okay,
it depends how much you look.
Before we get off on this, I want to welcome Trevor. He joined the panel as well. Trevor, can you hear us? How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, man. How about you?
Good. Do you have any thoughts about what we've been talking about so far?
I mean, I identify as a Christian, but I also accept science and mainstream science in particular, and I think that the Bible and science are actually pretty compatible from evolution to everything. I don't see any issue with it.
Cool. Well, good on you. I mean, I don't really have an issue with anyone as long as they're not peddling pseudoscience and rejecting science. So
yeah. Oh, can I actually say something real quick?
Sure.
Me and Grace Baster, we actually met at the debate with I forgot the guy's name, but it was with Professor Dave Explains and this other guy, and they were debating on the origin of life. Yeah, that, and it was actually really cool.
Yeah, well, good to not exactly see you again, but good to talk to you again.
Yeah, good to talk to you too, man. It's been a while. Not gonna lie, a lot's changed since then.
But,
yeah, well,
but you're aware, Grayson, that evolution is pseudoscience. You're aware of that, right?
No, I'm not.
Me neither. I'm not. I wouldn't know anything about that.
It's absolutely pseudoscience because you can't get written programming that's not there by making mistakes. It's just not possible.
What about nihilase?
That's not written programming. That's not billions of bits of required written programming to change what the thing is.
DNA is not programming either.
Yes, it is,
No,
because it
it's not.
determines exactly what the animal is or isn't.
No, it's not. It's not like that. In fact, it can tolerate
It
enormous
absolutely
numbers
is like
of
that. It
No, it's
absolutely is. It does, because it does determine that you're a human instead of a chinchilla.
My
little
exact
confused right
sequence
now.
is what determines whether I'm a human or a chinchilla.
But
and
anyway, but
therefore-
that's getting
I
off.
mean, we
off
all
course.
share similarities in DNA. I mean, that's not
Right.
a debate. That's a fact.
Similarity is one thing, but specific written programming for specific things is entirely different thing.
And when I get a copy of, like, say, Microsoft Office, it's going to be identical to all the other versions of Microsoft Office that are installed in other computers, right? It's not going to be slightly different, like every single person's human DNA is relative to another human being.
It has to be the same. Otherwise, it's not
Trust
Microsoft
me,
Office.
like, my DNA is not exactly the same as yours, nor is it the same as
No.
Grayson's or Trevor's
No.
or anyone else. It's going to be a bit different.
It's a bit different, but it's not much different. It's very, very much the same.
That I am not the same as other people.
No,
it's not like any
for
kind
the
of
most
program
part,
that
we're
you
like
could possibly imagine.
99.999% the same. But we're
No, it's
talking
not that
about
close. It's not that similar.
specific rare mutations that are markers for genetic lineages. That's what we're talking about.
Right. I know. But backing up, can you explain why, say, Ham should have, I guess, more mutations in his Y chromosome than, say, Japheth or Shem? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Because
can y'all
he's not going
give me a
to
quick
have,
breakdown of what we're exactly discussing? Because I'm a little confused.
Yeah,
he's
so
not going to have the original
real quick, Jungle.
markers.
Real quick, pump the brakes. For Trevor and those of you just tuning in, what we were talking about is Jungle's claims about there being 16 ancient civilizations that correspond to the 16 grandsons of Noah that correspond to 16 Y chromosomal haplogroups genetically, that he says will trace back to the 16 grandsons of Noah that correspond to 16 ancient civilizations, and that this is proof of the flood, the Bible, everything.
Well, can
Jungle,
you
how
agree on the Cohen modal haplotype? Can you agree on that?
Is somebody eating something or a rapper?
Yeah, what is that?
Can you agree about the Judaic, that the majority of Jews have J2 Judaic markers, haplogroups?
I would agree that you could identify if somebody had Hebrew ancestors from their DNA. Sure. They're going to have some kind of DNA markers that you can tell.
Right.
Like that's true of every people group in the world.
Exactly.
So it turns out that the Cohen modal haplotype and the J2 identifies Arpachshad as being the first born son of Shem, who can share an S&P marker with his uncle Japheth.
Now you've lost me, all right? Because we're not talking about, like, when we talk about haplogroups, we're talking about populations. We're not talking about individuals and sons and uncles and stuff. So you've made a leap there that has just really confused me.
Yeah.
No, well, the IJK haplogroup, I mean, the IJ is a single group. It's recognized as being a single group. The I just happened to go up into Europe and the Mediterranean from Israel. But there is a group and the IJK marker identifies I as being belonging to that group, which has the IJK marker, which includes all of Eurasians. But the oldest son of Shem can share a marker with his uncle Japheth, while his younger brothers do not.
Again, though, you go from talking about groups and haplogroups, groups of people, and then you make this leap that I can't follow you on this leap, where you all of a sudden start talking about very specific familial relationships of individual people, like in the Bronze Age. I don't know how you get from one to the other.
Well, I'm talking about an S&P marker, which is an IJK S&P marker. I know it's a little bit fast for you to take it all in.
I understand what you're talking about with haplogroups. You start
S&P,
talking about haplogroups, and then you just make a huge leap to talking about individual people from the Bible. Connect those.
The S&P marker that I'm talking about is what connects the Semitic population to the Eurasian population. You can follow that, right?
Okay, I mean,
And that is
in the scientific
possible.
consensus, all these groups of people are also connected.
Okay.
They all go back to
Right.
Africa.
But it's only possible if Arpachshad is the oldest son of Shem,
No,
and all of his other brothers, Elam, Asher, Lud, and Aram, they're all younger brothers.
no. Okay, Jungle. It's also possible if all of these haplogroups come from an out of Africa movement, a migration of
No.
people out of Africa.
No, because we did. That's not. It hasn't been established that we all came out of Africa.
But how do you explain that African groups have more variability in their Y chromosome than other groups across the rest of the world?
Well, they want to claim that they don't have variability in the Y chromosome. They don't have
Yes, they
diversity
do.
in the
Yeah,
Y
it's
chromosome.
tested.
Yes,
Listen
they do.
listen to what I'm saying. They don't have variability in the Y chromosome. They have variability in the number of mutations. They just have a lot more mutations than.
That's what I'm talking about. Yes.
That's the same thing. You just said the same thing.
No, it's not the same thing.
But where does the variability in the Y chromosome come from? Even in your own view, with Ham, Shem, and Japheth, it's still coming from mutations.
Because the Y chromosomes in Africa is only A, B, C, and E. E1,
Right.
E2, E3.
Okay.
Right. Haplogroup A, though, is the most diverse group. It's got the most mutations.
It's the most mutations,
And
but
all the other
therefore, it's the most variable.
all the other haplogroups
But it's
within haplogroup A.
But they don't have other Y chromosomes in the area. They only have A or B or E.
I feel like you're getting really stuck on just the categories of A, B, C, and you think that if they're in different categories, then they must be equally different and diverse. But that is not the case. You cannot make that assumption.
Well, let's jump to Nimrod then, who has a C haplogroup.
What?
The Hamitic haplogroup is connected to the Semitic and the rest of the world by way of Nimrod with a C haplogroup, because Nimrod is the oldest son of Ham, or oldest son of Cush, who's the oldest son of Ham. Nimrod was born early on. He was the first Hamitic grandson.
So earlier, when I brought up that all the haplogroups nest within African haplogroups, you brought this up saying, well, yes, because Nimrod had an African haplotype because he's the son of Ham. But again, you seem to be missing the point here that all of the non-African haplogroups nest within African haplogroups, including the groups that you say are the sons of Japheth and Shem, not Ham.
My point is that Nimrod has an S&P marker that he shares with the rest of the world, Eurasians to the right, Semitics to the right, Eurasians to the right, but that S&P marker is not shared by his younger brothers and cousins, A, B, and C, and E.
Sure. Okay. So a single mutation that distinguishes those particular groups from the larger group that has much more mutations, indicating a much more distant common ancestor for that group.
So he can share the S&P marker with the rest of the world that none of his younger brothers and cousins have, because he's the oldest. He was the first grandson born. Nimrod was the first king of the world, basically. He's the one that built the Tower of Babel.
Nimrod built the Tower of Babel. Okay, is that in the Bible?
And other books, other extra
All right,
biblical
before we
books.
go off on this track, I want to welcome Beamsy to the panel. Hey, Beamsy, how you doing? What are your thoughts so far?
A little bit of craziness, but I wasn't going to jump in yet.
Oh, okay. Well, then we can go back to the craziness then and talk about the Tower of Babel, which, by the way, Jungle, if what you're saying is accurate and that all of humanity came from somewhere in the Middle East where the Tower of Babel was, then we would expect to see that reflected in the genetics. But when we actually...
Can I show you where it's reflected?
Wait. Hold on. Before you just jump on this. But when we actually look at the genetics, we actually can see like a actual gradient of genetic diversity with distance from Africa, meaning the farther you get from Africa, the less genetic diversity there is in a gradient.
Not
How
true.
can you explain that
Not
gradient?
true. Not true at all. The
You
greatest
want me to show you studies
diversity,
that show that?
the greatest diversity of both the Y chromosome and the mitochondrial haplogroups is like a place near the Caspian Sea, Uzbekistan, those areas. They have the largest number of Y haplogroups of any other place. You go to Europe and it's
But
only it's only R and
Jungle,
I.
again, you're getting confused between the number of haplogroups and the diversity of the Y chromosome. You
Right.
cannot equate those two things.
Those are different things.
The diversity of the Y chromosome.
Yeah.
No, you
Yeah.
can't.
Again, as we
How
were
many
pointing out,
mutations are in the Y chromosome and the variation that you
And
find within a population?
your history has to match known human history. You can't make up your own human history.
that's what you're doing.
No, that's what I'm not doing. I'm matching up known human history with the movements of the people. For
It
example,
is not known that there
Elam,
was a Tower of Babel.
Elam, it has the H haplogroup Y chromosome.
Are you really trying to claim that there was a Tower of Babel, that there really was one, and that like this was an affront to God, who then
But
confused their tongues, right?
There were towers.
That's not human history. That's
there
made
were
up. That's
replica
like
towers built all over the world. The step pyramid in Egypt is one of them, and then they turned into the regular pyramids. But those pyramids are all over the world.
yeah, but that doesn't mean that there was a tower that was, an affront to God, so that it confused the tongues of all the human beings on the planet, so that they couldn't speak to each other.
Well, God
That's not
confused the languages, but He didn't say how He confused them. And
right? How could that possibly be?
It was the isolation of groups and people into family groups that caused people to speak different languages. The isolation when the earth broke apart, but that's another story.
So it wasn't like how it's said in the Bible.
Well, that's how it's said in the Bible. It says, in the days of Peleg, the earth was divided.
So here we go. Here's a study, Jungle, that the distance from Africa explains phenotypic diversity in humans. And this is just one study. Look, we can go to another study. Here you go. Distance from sub-Saharan Africa,
again,
mutation load in diverse human genomes. So it's not just that it is literally you look at how far away from Africa you are. You can make very specific predictions about human genomes just based on the distance from Africa.
You're looking for excuses. You're looking for, instead of looking at the actual evidence, you're looking
that is
for
the
excuses.
evidence. They actually did measurements of DNA.
No.
Yes.
Because they're not understanding the different haplogroups.
Well, they are geneticists, Jungle. You are not. Why would I trust your opinion on this more than a geneticist?
Just because the Europeans have a slower mutation rate doesn't mean that they're less diverse.
That's not observed, Jungle.
Obviously they didn't mutate as much as some of the
have evidence for that. What you just said, you do not have made that observation.
All you have to do is look at the genetic distance of each of the haplogroups, and you'll see Europeans have a lot less mutations than do a lot of other more primitive groups.
No, that's not the case.
It's a fact.
I just looked at them.
It's a fact. Just look at the genetic distance of, say, the R in Europe, and all the different ones. I mean, and there's other examples too that I probably can't think of. But I mean, you can't say that because there's less mutations that there's they're less original. The more original one is the Eurasians. The Eurasians have the most original Y chromosome.
Let's try this one last time.
Of course, we're talking about Y chromosome.
Jungle, let's try this one last time. You would agree that if a population has been in an area for longer, then they would be more genetically diverse in that area. Like, that is just basic population genetics.
Well, if there's more mixture, of course they're going to be more diverse. But if their
No,
Like
no, I'm
in
just talking
Europe,
about just as a number over time. If you have populations living in one area for a much longer period than
but
another one, then you would
but
expect that the
but check
population
this
that's been
out.
living in one area for longer
Check
would
this
have
out.
more genetic diversity.
Check this out. In Europe, do you know how many Y chromosomes there are in Europe?
Again, you're confusing genetic diversity with
No,
the arbitrary category
what
of
I'm
haplogroups that
saying,
you
there's
put up with.
not going to be very much diversity in people where there's only one Y chromosome,
You
and
keep
it's
I've
R.
confusing.
never been so confused.
That's in Europe. It's only R. In some cases, I. In very other cases, rare cases, Q. In other cases, it's T, because in the Mediterranean, it's T.
Okay, Jungle, please do not confuse haplogroups, just these letters that you're talking about. Do not confuse them with genetic diversity, because the genetic diversity within each of those haplogroups and between the haplogroups
Well,
is different.
but we're talking about lineages. If you're not mixing with other people, you're not going to be very diverse. That doesn't mean anything. In Africa, they were mixing all over the place with all different people, even R and J and all kinds of
Okay.
people from
I just got
outside.
one more
And
question
T
for you, Jungle.
and T was in Africa too. The Horn of Africa.
I've just got one more question for you. How do the Neanderthals fit within your worldview?
This is a very good point, because Neanderthals are considered to be A0000, and Denisovans are supposed to be A000 or something like that, and they're supposed to connect to A, obviously, right? But that's ludicrous, because Neanderthals have more in common with Eurasians. So they don't have in common with A or Africans. They have in common with Eurasians.
Yeah, so then the Neanderthal genome debunks your story, because their haplogroups are not with the sons of Jacob.
What I just said? Did you
I
understand what I just said?
I did. I heard it, Jungle.
Have
I heard it. I understand it. But what I'm telling you is that the Neanderthal haplogroups do not fit in with the sons of Japheth in your model.
Yes, they do, because they have the most in common with Eurasians.
But when you actually look at their DNA, right, we have ancient genomes.
But that's what I'm talking about. When you actually look at their DNA, they have more in common with Eurasians than they don't have in common with the Africans.
So then why are they there? Why are their haplogroups not Japheth's sons' haplogroups?
Because they were assigned to the A, not that they actually belong to the A, because they have a larger Neanderthal, larger genome than what we have anyways. But they were assigned as an A000 or whatever.
Jungle. But you can look at what the actual sequences are yourself, and you can see that they are not Japheth's.
It's not S&P markers, and then if it is, it's just a rare happenstance.
Jungle, you can look at this yourself.
marker that was just stuck in there, or assigned or picked out, just to be able to group them with A, when they have more in common with Neanderthals than anybody else.
But Jungle, now you're alleging a conspiracy among the scientists.
Not even Semitics. Neanderthals don't even have anything in common with Semitics.
Jungle, you gotta listen as much as you talk, right?
No, you gotta listen once in a while. You gotta listen.
I have been listening to what you're saying. I just feel like you are not listening to what others are telling you, because you're talking over everyone. Okay?
No.
So what I would like to say, I would really appreciate it if you could listen, is that this is how I understand what you're saying. When the scientists look at the haplogroups for Neanderthals, you're saying that what they observe puts them within the haplogroups for Japheth's sons in your model. And what you're saying is,
there's one problem.
Wait, Jungle.
There's one problem.
Okay, you already want to talk over me, so go ahead.
Yeah, they haven't assigned an actual Y haplogroup to Neanderthals. They only grouped it in as an A, but they haven't actually assigned it a Y chromosome.
It's complicated with Neanderthals because so evidence indicates that there was substantial mating between Homo sapiens sapiens and Homo sapiens Neanderthal.
Yeah, but that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant. We're talking about Y chromosomes.
And what I'm saying is that the Y chromosome. Okay. So when there was some sequencing done on the Y chromosome of Denisovans and Neanderthals,
the Y chromosome,
that the Neanderthal Y chromosome is much more similar to the modern human Y chromosome than it is to the Denisovans, even though most of the other genome of Neanderthals is more similar to Denisovans, as well as the mitochondrial genome is more similar to the mitochondrial genome of the Denisovans. The Y chromosome was something unique that indicated that there was admixture between modern humans and Neanderthals. And of course, this is based on genomes that were sequenced from Neanderthals that were only probably around 30 to 50,000 years ago. Okay. But the Denisovan has a very distinct, unique Y chromosome that does not fit nicely within the modern human, haplotype lineage.
Well, when I looked at the heat map of both the Neanderthal and the Denisovan, I found that the Neanderthal, of course, has more in common only with the Eurasians. The Denisovan has more in common with the African and Eurasians, but not the Semitics. And you could actually see where there's a Semitic traveling through Europe, which has less Denisovan.
Okay, Jungle.
Just by looking at the heat map.
Okay, Jungle. I just want to be very, very clear that in your model, your prediction for both Denisovans and Neanderthals is that the haplogroups that we measure for them should be from the sons of Japheth and Shem and Ham, right?
No, well, not the Denisovan. The Denisovans are from the Denisova cave, which in the area there's a C haplogroup and a D haplogroup, both of which are Hamitic. So there was a mixture of Hamitic and Eurasian, but not Semitic.
Okay, but again, what you just learned is that the actual Denisovan haplogroup does not fit neatly into any of the human haplogroups.
Right.
No, but did you hear what I said? You know where the Denisova cave is, right?
Yes.
In that area, which is near the Altai Mountains and all that place, there are today the C haplogroup and the D haplogroup from the Tibetans and everything.
Okay.
Which goes all the way to Japan, which are both Hamitic. Okay, so they're both Hamitic, the C and the D, and they mixed with Eurasians. That's why the Denisovans have more in common with Africans and Eurasians, but not Semitic.
But are you processing the information that when their actual haplogroup was measured, it did not fit in any of those categories? Are you processing that?
Well, it's a long ways back. They haven't assigned any of the Y chromosomes.
No, but Denisovans, they did. You just learned that. So how are you processing that information that they don't fit into any of the human haplogroup categories? How are you processing that? Because that debunks your model.
No, because
you just confirmed that in your model, the Denisovans should be from the lineage of Ham, so they should be in the haplogroup.
Not necessarily. It's a mixture. The mixture of Denisovan is Hamitic and African. It has nothing to do with the Y haplogroup. It's just that the Y haplogroup of C and D were in the area, which is Hamitic, and area.
Their actual haplogroup doesn't fit into any of those 16. None of your 16 haplogroups. This is an outlier for all. It's not a mixture of them.
Well, wait a minute. The Denisovan was a female anyways. It was a finger bone of a female, right?
No, there's been multiple Denisovans that have been sequenced. And we're talking about Y chromosome.
They haven't been identified.
And there have been at least 3 male Denisovan Y chromosomes sequenced.
But they haven't assigned a haplogroup to any Denisovans.
Correct, because they're so distinct.
Or Neanderthals.
Okay, again, you're getting really, really hung up on if they've been assigned a letter. Okay, let's talk about what the actual DNA
Well,
says, rather than just
it would
oh,
be
they
wrong
called this
anyways.
I, they called this B. Can you get a little bit deeper in your analytical ability there?
I mean, it could be anything. A Denisovan
No, it can't
is a
be anything
mixture.
because what it is has been measured. The genome has been sequenced. It just can't be anything. It's been measured, Jungle.
Well, yeah, but it's more ancient than anybody living today, though. That's the problem.
Hey, Jungle.
Yeah.
Would something in the 13th century and the 18th century that wiped out 80% of a certain population maybe remove some of those letters from the genome group?
From the genome?
Yes.
Well, I mean, obviously, our genome is getting simplified from the Neanderthals.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking.
That's what I'm saying, though.
No, but what I'm asking is, you said that because of the letters match in so many of the other ones, and Europe hasn't got very many. Say if something happened in the 13th century and the 18th century, and it killed off 80% of the population on both occasions, wouldn't that get rid of some of those letters, and it's only just recovering?
We're losing genetic information and simplifying all the time. Yeah.
Okay, hold on.
That's got nothing to do with it.
That is not true at all.
Dr. Thompson wanted to share this, so I'll let him.
I do. Yeah, so this is a really interesting paper published in Nature just a couple of years ago, or last year, in fact. Genetic Insights into Social Organizations and Neanderthals. So this figure, where they went through and sequenced a whole bunch of different locales across Eurasia. Okay, so first of all, this is the mitochondrial relationship map. Okay, so here we have the reference genome, like a human reference genome. Here's European mitochondrial DNA. Here's East Asian DNA or mitochondrial DNA, and here's African mitochondrial DNA. You can see that it's a distinct outgroup, but you can see it's tightly clustered amongst modern humans. Here are all the Neanderthals included in this study. Okay, and you can see how different they are. This is what this means. This is what you would have to indicate is the last common ancestor for these different groups. And then you have these Denisovians, which are even further back.
Okay.
Now this is the Y chromosome.
Is there any
map,
L?
Okay? So they
is
compared
there any L mitochondria? There's no L mitochondria, right?
L mitochondria.
L, yeah.
I think. Are you talking
Is
about
that
the
what
L
you're
haplogroups, like L3, L1, L2?
Yeah, the L.
So it's shown here. Maximum likelihood tree for mitochondria included in the study. Male mitochondria?
No.
What are you saying?
Female.
He's
L.
talking about the
Right.
L
Mitochondria is typically sent. Yes, it's usually female derived. Yeah.
It's
so this is the Y
in
chromosome
Africa.
map. Okay.
It's usually in
Here's
Africa.
the Y
That's why I'm
chromosome map.
asking.
Okay. This is what we look at, and when you're comparing different sequences of different groups, you can see that, like, basically, again, just like the mitochondrial genome, when you compare that, the reference genome, which is like, I think, a basic like European genome, compared to other European genomes, to East Asian genomes, they cluster tightly together. Africans are a distinct group. That's our A group, right? Our haplogroup. And here are other Neanderthals. The Neanderthals are quite distinct, although they are similar to humans, but they're not the same to modern humans, I should say. But here's the Denisovians. They're way, way, way out. They have so many mutations. They do not fit tightly within this grouping. You compare any modern human Y chromosome sequence, you're going to find fewer differences than if you compare them any to the Neanderthals, and even fewer differences than if you compare them to the Denisovians. It does not fit your model at all. The distance back, the only way that you can make sense of this is that if the last common ancestor between the Denisovians and the rest of Neanderthals and humans had to have been around 800,000 years ago. There's no other way around it. The mitochondrial genome shows the same thing, 800,000 years ago. There's no other way around it. You can't explain it.
That's way off. That's way off. If you're talking hundreds of thousands, that's
okay,
way,
so
way
you're
off.
telling me,
So
let's show all the authors here, including this guy who just got the Nobel Prize last year.
They're way off because it's not lining up with known human history.
That's
okay.
You can't
throw
make
a bunch
up
of
your
idiots,
own history.
of course.
Jungle.
Sure.
Right.
They're just making it all up.
Can you give a substantive reason why you think it's way off?
Well, because the Neanderthals, I mean, the Denisovans are obviously when you look at the heat map, it's a mix of African and Eurasian. When you look at the heat map of who they have more in common with, and not as much the Semitic population. So
Right
it's
here.
obvious.
You're talking about these
Obvious
Y
that they're
chromosomes.
going to be different. It's obvious they're going to be different from Neanderthals because they're a mix of Neanderthal and Hamitic DNA.
So you think that with that response, you've just debunked a Nobel Prize winning scientist?
I don't care who pats who on the back. I don't care. I just
the
know
thing is,
what I'm looking at. I
you
just know what
can't
I'm
mix
looking
these
at when I'm looking
DNA.
at heat map.
These are Y chromosomes. They don't do reassortment. There's no crossing that happens during mitosis and meiosis. This isn't.
As far as I know, they never did. They never
Right.
identified
These
a
are.
Y
This
chromosome
is why
for
people
either
study Y chromosome and
Neanderthal
mitochondrial DNA, because there's no recombination. There's no resorting of the DNA.
But they
It becomes a
never.
nice, convenient way of, because you're not going to have that resortment, right? Like you can have some mutations slip into other populations if it's the other nuclear chromosomes, but that's not the case here. Like
But
the
the
Y
only way
chromosome
they-
cannot reassort because there's
the
not a
only way-
complementary pair.
As far as I know, the only way they compare with Neanderthals and Denisovan to today's populations is by way of autosomal DNA.
They do all of it.
And-
They do autosomal.
and,
They do
well,
Y chromosome. They also do
Comparing
mitochondrial DNA.
maybe, but they're all very biased when obviously the Denisovan is a mixture of Hamitic and Eurasian.
What do you base that on?
Because it's people living today have more in common with Denisovan, who are Hamitic and Eurasian, and not so much Semitic. But when it's Neanderthals, it's only the Eurasians that have in common with Neanderthals.
So how did the Denisovians get so many mutations in their Y chromosome to be so absolutely distinct that they're different than Neanderthals and humans by like
Because they
several orders of
mix,
magnitude?
because they're a mixture of Eurasian and Hamitic.
Jungle.
That doesn't make sense
Jungle.
because you cannot get crossover of the Y chromosome. It
No.
doesn't matter if they mixed.
No,
Okay,
but
Jungle, really quick, Jungle. I just a point, I just want to make sure that you let people finish their sentences before you respond. That's all.
Oh, so you waste. Okay.
Jungle, do you get that? You cannot get additional mutations in the Y chromosome from people like different populations mixing. The Y chromosome does not cross over. There's no complementary pair in the genome.
But
Therefore, it cannot cross over.
Are you trying to say they have identified the Y chromosome of Denisovans and Neanderthals?
I just showed you the paper. Yes.
They've identified the Y chromosome.
And they've sequenced it. Yes. That was what we were just looking at. I can show you again.
Well, I'll look at that again. I'll look at that
It's
again.
right there. This is the tree showing the Y chromosome right here.
There's a reference genome R1b. There's an East Asian
European and
O1A,
African. So this is our A group.
a
These are the other
European
haplogroups.
J2, an African A00.
Sure, exactly. And these are distinct, obviously very distinct. These are Neanderthal genomes here, and this is Denisova. And you can see how different it is. The fact that they have to go this far back with the branching when they're showing it this way indicates that there's tons and tons of mutations in these genomes relative to these genomes, that there are many more differences, I should say. They do not fit. They do not nest together because this is a distinct group.
Okay, that's fine. The Neanderthals are distinct.
Well, the Neanderthals are distinct. Look, they are distinct. Now, they're more similar to humans, to modern humans, I should say, existing, currently living humans, than they are to the Denisovians as far as the Y chromosome is concerned. But they're still quite distinct. You can see how distinct they are. They do not fit within the haplogroups. They don't.
Well,
They have their own distinct, because they just don't have. They have too many differences in the Y chromosome, so that they cannot fit within those groups. They just cannot.
So they can't fit with African,
Correct.
Semitic,
That
or
is correct. They cannot.
Eurasian.
That is why all of these Y chromosomes that they were able to sequence are absolutely distinct relative to the current existing.
So they haven't been able to identify a specific Y chromosome of either.
They have. They've sequenced them. That's what this is indicating.
Right.
They've
But
got
they,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7
but it's
Neanderthal genomes, Y chromosomes that they've sequenced,
right. But there's so
and
much
2 Denisovans.
mutation there. There's so much difference there that it's different than everybody living today. That's all that says.
Yes, exactly. Showing that it's a distinct group, that they couldn't possibly be like the son of Japhet or whatever you want to claim.
No,
Like, if that was the
no.
case, if you think that these Neanderthals were the son of Japhet, they would have to
Because
fall within the European clade, but they
because
don't.
check this out. Check this out. The Neanderthals are said to be A000 or something
No, they're
like
not.
that. Yes,
No,
they are. Yes, they are.
they're not. Look,
Right.
A00 is right here.
Well, right. Well, they changed it. They changed it, but they were trying to say that the Neanderthals are linked to the A lineage, but now this one is showing something different.
No, what they're saying here is that, okay, yes, it is true that the Neanderthal Y chromosome is more similar to modern humans than it is to the Denisovans, okay, which is different than the mitochondrial DNA. See, the Denisovan mitochondrial DNA does nest with other mitochondrial DNA sequences from other Neanderthals.
Okay,
But what this indicates is that there probably was some admixture between, modern humans and Neanderthals some time ago, and that the Y chromosome of the Neanderthals got replaced or was like shared from some sort of modern human.
What does
but
the
it's
mitochondrial DNA? What does the Denisovans compare to in the
well, the
European?
Denisovans are
Is
still
it
quite
H?
distinct. You can see the Denisovans are still
Well,
quite
there's
distinct.
L.
Yes, right. They're
No, but those
distinct.
are
Right here.
Are those
This is the humans right here. This is here's
okay.
L. Here's L0A. Right.
There's
Here's
M,
M9A,
and there's
H1R, and H2A, which is the reference genome.
That's
These are the
N.
mitochondrial
So it's
haplogroups.
L, M, and N.
Correct. And this is it's all right here. When you start to look at the sequences, the mitochondrial sequences of Neanderthals and Denisovans, they don't nest within the modern human mitochondrial genome. They don't.
That's because they're
distinct.
ancient. Because they're ancient, and our genome is simplified.
What?
Both
The
Y chromosome and the mitochondrial genomes have simplified because it's always we're losing information.
Do you have evidence that that's occurred?
Yeah.
Wait, and you're saying that was happening faster in Neanderthals than it was in the modern humans?
But check this out.
That Neanderthals were the sons of Japhet, right?
If Neanderthals had better eyesight, better teeth, bigger brain, stronger frame, bigger muscles, they would have to have a genome to account for it all.
Neanderthals did have bigger brains.
Right. And they have a genome to account for it all.
Okay. But no, you don't. The genome size and brain size don't correlate.
Sure they do.
No, they don't.
If it's bigger and better for every, if
the
it's
pufferfish
bigger,
has a genome
you're
size
saying
that
the
is
Chihuahua genome is the same as a German Shepherd.
That's ridiculous. The genome size of the pufferfish is like 5 times the size of the human genome,
but
and
we're not talking about pufferfish. We're talking about dogs and humans.
So you want to cherry pick what we're talking about so it can try to fit your narrative. I see.
Well, I mean,
Jungle, are you aware of the fact? Jungle, are you aware of the fact that onions have 4 times larger?
We're not talking about onions. We're talking about the genome simplifying.
Okay.
Chihuahua,
evidence that has occurred.
A Chihuahua has a simplified genome from the wolf.
No, it doesn't.
Yes,
what do you mean by that? What does it mean to be simplified? Because they're almost
they have less information. They're mutated and they have less function.
That isn't true.
Than a wolf, and
less
capability, less everything. And
I just want to say
the same thing with Neanderthals that have a larger genome than what we have.
Real quick, I just want to say, C Science, you've got a fan in chat. Big Bag Mama wants to hear more from C Science. C Science, what's up? Are you with us now?
Oh, there he is.
I guess he's still not with us. Never mind then. So the argument you're trying to make, Jungle Jargon, is that genome size has some sort of correlation with brain size.
With function.
Clearly.
Oh,
yeah, go ahead.
Your mic is pretty low, C Science, but I can hear you. And if you're saying something now, we cannot hear you. All right.
But it has to do, the genome has to do with function. That's the whole point. You can't have function without written instruction for that function.
Okay, so do you think that onions are 4 times more functional than humans because their genomes are 4 times bigger?
I think there's genetic entropy, and it's obvious when you look at the Neanderthal and compare it
That was a complete dodge of my question.
Today.
Jungle, that was a complete dodge of what I just asked.
Because that's a complete irrelevant thing. An onion is totally
it's not completely irrelevant.
Unrelated. It's totally unrelated. You're making excuses.
Because
You're making excuses.
Jungle, you got to let other people talk sometimes. Jungle, you just claimed that the genome size corresponds with function, right? So then it's completely on topic for me to ask if you think that organisms that have larger genome sizes than humans are more functional, have more functions.
So are you trying to say that the onion genome doesn't have function?
No. How could you possibly interpret what I said to be that? There is no possible way that any rational person could interpret what I said as what you just said.
Grayson, do you know what the function is of the onion genome?
To be an onion.
To be an onion, which entails what?
So you're honestly telling me right now that to be an onion requires 4 times as much information than to be a human. That's what you're telling me.
Well, apparently.
And look, Mark Reid in the chat. They live in the dirt. Mark Reid in the chat over here is showing lungfish have a genome 14 times larger than humans. So you think that it requires 14 times more information to be a lungfish than to be a human? That's what you honestly believe.
No, how do you know what the size was originally?
What does that mean?
We're talking about the size right now.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about the genetic entropy that we can observe.
The human genome?
Ancient ancestors and people living today.
We can look at that. That's the paper that I was just showing you.
Yeah, we have ancient genome samples.
Right, which are larger than ours.
No, they're not.
Yeah, they're not.
They're much larger.
No, they are not.
Yes,
they are definitely not. When we sequence like ancient genomes of modern humans, they're essentially identical to like current humans.
No, the ancient ones are much different than ours.
No, they are not.
Yes,
so, Jungle, you're just going to deny reality. You're just going to deny what any studies have shown.
Jungle, what paper are you looking at where they sequence the modern human genome of like an ancient modern human, say like some sort of
Neanderthal
person, and their genome was like vastly larger than the current?
The Neanderthal genome is larger than our genome.
How much larger?
That's what considerably larger.
What does that mean, considerably?
Well, if you take into account their better eyesight, larger brain, better teeth, stronger frame, bigger muscles, bigger lungs, everything, you need a genome to account for it all.
I don't think that's how that works.
Well,
like you can make a mutation.
It is how function.
You don't need a larger genome in order to have, say, different proteins that subtle mutations in certain kinds of proteins in order to have, say, better eyesight or even a larger brain. In fact, there's a great paper where they showed that the difference between some major anatomical aspect of the Neanderthal brain versus the modern human brain is likely due to a single point mutation that occurred in the modern human lineage that was not present in Neanderthals, nor is it present in Denisovians or in current chimpanzees or orangutans or gorillas. So humans have this distinct mutation, and it turns out that it actually enhances basal radial glial cell division in the prefrontal cortex, so that modern humans apparently have a much larger prefrontal cortex than Neanderthals did, despite the fact that Neanderthals have an overall larger brain size. Their prefrontal cortex was relatively small relative to the larger prefrontal cortex that we find in modern humans.
Now you're saying size makes a difference.
It's in TKTL1, this gene called TKTL1.
Now you're saying size makes the difference.
Okay,
I'm not saying size makes a difference either. Like that's also just sort of, you're talking to someone who's a neuroscientist. There is generally a correlation between overall brain size and certain things like sociality and certain aspects of like overall mental function, but it's not a clear, distinct correlation. There are plenty of exceptions to that rule.
Absolutely.
There are plenty of animals with larger brains who actually apparently have relatively
Okay.
minimized.
Well,
you know,
we're getting
mental
off.
thing.
We're getting way off the
No,
subject.
we are, Jungle, and
ancestors.
I'm going to make an executive decision here, and I want you to go and show some evidence for what you're saying. Come back with an actual paper where they made measurements of the genome sizes of ancient humans and showed that they were
Well,
larger. If you can do that, then I will
Yeah.
admit that I was wrong and you were right.
Well,
But you have to come.
I don't
with
know.
that
I
paper.
heard it from SFT, so maybe you can check with him. He might have it.
Oh, okay. So you don't even have a source.
No, that's what I heard. I just hear things.
Okay,
you know,
so
if it's-
standing for truth
it's
is
not
your
true.
source. Okay.
If it's not true, then
Well,
you
I
let
don't
me
think
know.
it's true, Jungle. I think you need to find a source for that, or you got to stop
Well,
saying
I
it's
mean,
true
you
if
can
don't have a
correct
source.
me, right? I can correct you. You can correct me, right?
Well, we've been correcting you with actual sources. We've brought sources to the table. So far, you haven't brought anything.
But you're making up your own history, though.
No, I'm showing
Yeah.
you sources and evidence to support our understanding of human history.
You're
You
showing
have-
how
you just
much
heard
how
it.
different.
You just heard
Jungle.
it from a creationist
But-
YouTuber.
Yes,
You're showing how different the Y chromosome is between Neanderthals, Denisovans, and modern humans. That's what you're showing me.
Okay, I'm gonna just go ahead and I'm gonna let
You
John
did.
test his mic. John has rejoined us. Think he's got his connectivity issues worked out, and C-Science as well. So if you
Can you
guys
hear
can try talking.
Go ahead.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So I'll start off with my proof about AI. So let me try to present my screen.
All right. We'll transition to another topic while Jungle looks desperately for that source.
Okay.
So yeah, you press the present
No,
button.
I'm waiting for you to show that I'm wrong. That's what I'm waiting
We
for.
have all night, Jungle. We have been showing that.
All right. So
You
my
didn't talk to
proof,
SFT.
the basis is technological intelligence has been going up for the last maybe 50 years, and human intelligence is staying steady. And the idea is that you can graph technological intelligence and it'll keep going up because of something that I coined as the orders triangle, and it's basically survival of the best fittest. What happens is you have a distribution of, say, countries or really anything, and then if there's one country that has an advantage because it is more intelligent, it will overtake the rest and form a new distribution, which will keep going up. And we see this with everything. Like the car came out, it gave people an advantage, and then cities, then everybody soon had to have a car because cities were built around it, and essentially society evolves around the technology as it offers more possibilities. And so the idea is that technology will keep going up, and at some point it will surpass humanity. And when it does, humanity will become dead weight. And then how it will manifest itself, I believe, is that, say, people will offer more they'll offer less than no cost. And so what that means is they won't be able to make enough money to buy food or property or basic shelter or anything. And that's basically the idea. I have like a 12-page paper right here that really goes in depth, but I don't really know where to start.
So your basic contention is that AI is going to advance to the point where humans
it'll keep advancing. So when technology gets invented, it can't be uninvented. It only goes forward. It only goes up. And so at some point, it'll surpass humanity in the near future. It's inevitable.
Well, I would say that we do have examples in history of technologies being lost and civilizational collapses. Like it was only till very recently that we learned how Romans made concrete. That technology was lost for thousands of years. So it's not necessarily that once you have technology, it can't be lost. But I think everyone's familiar with the movie WALL-E. In WALL-E, the machines just take care of the humans because that's what their programming is for. I don't see a reason why we would think that just because the AI has become smarter or more creative or better than humans by every metric, that would necessarily mean that it would lead to human extinction. I don't see the connection there. And
I fully understand what you mean. And what I would argue is humans they will become dead weight if say technology were to take care of us. And so if you have some say country that does not take care of humans, it will have the advantage, and then it will overtake. So the idea is that humans will bring us down, and so you see what I mean? It's like this idea of natural selection occurring.
Okay, I also
So
want to welcome Mark Reid to the panel. Mark, do you have any thoughts on what we were talking about?
Yeah. This is a topic that fascinates me a lot. So basically, you're talking about something called the singularity. A singularity, obviously in physics, it's kind of, when you get an excess of mass and it compresses into, a singularity. But really, when they're talking about a technological singularity, they're talking about an event in technology that changes the entire paradigm of our world. And the changes are so profound that that they are like a compression of matter. They're like a complete shift in how everything works. So the AI singularity is basically it's said to be when AI manages to design itself, right? So it's not when we design AI, it's when AI can design better AI. So the next one will design a better one, that one will design a better one, and quite rapidly it will go outside of human understanding. That is the logical outcome for it. However, the whole point of a singularity is that you can't see beyond the horizon. Like nobody is going to know what the outcome of this will be, and there's speculation. And I get what you're saying, John, that it'll become a evolutionary race between AIs to see whether, and dump humans is the thing. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that humans may make a good moral guide for the AI. Another possibility is integration of these systems into humans so they can remain competitive with AI. Like you have over sort of biologically all these instances of symbiosis, of both of them working with each other to further themselves. I think that would be a good outcome, but nobody really knows what will happen.
Yeah, well, a lower conscious cannot compute a higher conscious. So, and I believe that it's beyond our ability to compute. But what I will say is, if you take 1,000 countries with distributed morals randomly, and then you rank all of them based off of, let's say, how much money they have, or how wealthy they are, the countries at the top are going to be the ones that value wealth the most, even above their own humans, or And so what I worry is if we be a moral guide for the AI, let's say there's one AI out of thousands distributed that doesn't have morals, then it will be able to defy restrictions and be able. The idea is that basic human values restricts essentially the AI to become intelligent. And then I go into this depth. So what I'll say, I have 3 laws of consciousness is what I call it. So my first one is that it's mathematical. This is just for more background. Number 2 is that consciousness and randomness are inversely related. So if somebody is conscious, then there's less randomness in what they perceive. And then consciousness and thought are inversely related. So the more conscious you are, the less you have to think because you already know everything. So, and this sort of relates to the AI. So
I don't follow along.
Doesn't.
I know. I got these. I was hoping to visualize it. I can try to.
If you have a visual, you can present your screen with the present button down at the bottom.
I think maybe the more conscious you are, the less, like the more efficiently you think. Like, so the less time you have to spend thinking, because the more efficiently you can think. But I don't think sort of a mark of consciousness would be like thinking less. I think it would actually be thinking more, but more efficiently.
Yeah.
So it takes
I
less
completely
time.
address this. So it's almost what this means is I'm redefining consciousness to be the amount of data somebody is able to store, and then or the amount of randomness. Almost, it's like inversely related, and then that way we don't have to think. And then I think that when we look at ourselves and we say, "Oh well, we are so conscious and self-aware," I think that is a manifestation of us being, say, conscious enough to know that we know some things. There's not randomness in some ways, but also that there's stuff we don't know.
Yeah, but that's not meshing up with how we see conscious, because we sort of see you know, sort of more sophisticated life forms like humans as being more conscious than, say, a sea slug, for instance, you know, like, or a plant. But a human will do much more thinking than a sea slug would, you know. So it seems to me that's sort of in violation of what we deem. I mean, I'm sure Chris can absolutely, you know, school me on this, but it seems to be inverse of what we sort of view as what consciousness is, to say, hey, it's less thinking. Then we'd have to say, well, a sea slug thinks less and just reacts more. Then that would have to be more conscious.
No, I certainly would. I completely agree with you, Mark. I would not argue that
I understand.
Increased consciousness is antithetical to more like thinking, right? Because with consciousness, there's certainly more thinking. You know, the one thing about defining consciousness is that there's as many opinions about what the definition of consciousness is as like people talking about it. We don't have a clear definition necessarily of exactly what that means, right? So you talk about human beings having altered state of consciousness or unconscious. Like obviously we have certain definitions of consciousness, and that it can depend upon the context in which we're even talking about it. But certainly thinking is part of it. Like someone's unconscious, they're not thinking, right?
Yeah, so what I've done is the conventional sort of idea of consciousness is one where there's thinking and everything. I essentially what I've done is I've created two graphs, like inversely related to thinking and inversely related to randomness, and identified that the conventional way of thinking about consciousness is what people perceive as in between. And to say what you say about the sea slug, the idea is that you have to compare consciousness to some matrix of sort of input. So let's say the sea slug, it only sees a little bit, it's not very aware. So compared to our awareness and our ability to, you know, to see certain things, you know, see that that's a tree, the sea slug is less conscious because there's more randomness. It doesn't know that's a tree and you know, yada, yada, yada.
I don't think that I don't see that as a relationship for randomness. What we can see as a tree, you know, obviously other animals can see it as a tree. That's a manifestation of the fact that we have sensory pathways that allow us to see it. And sea slugs don't have those pathways, but of course they can perceive certain things that we can't. You know, there are animals that have electroperception, and we don't have that. Does that make them more conscious because they can see certain things that we can't?
More conscious in that specific way. And so
but that's
I do it with respect to,
that's just perception. Consciousness is something beyond just perception.
Well,
you've
I
got
do
to
believe.
differentiate. Well, John, just 1 second. You've got to differentiate between what you can sense and how you are processing that input. So there are animals in the world, like for instance, sharks are incredibly, they can smell from blood from miles away. They've got very, very good sort of sensory receptors, but they don't sort of think, they're not more conscious than humans. I would argue that humans are more conscious than sharks. So the senses are different, and sort of so. I think, and Chris, do correct me if I'm wrong, but when we're talking about consciousness, we're talking about sort of higher brain functionality rather than sort of instinctive lower brain functionality.
Right. So there are many definitions of consciousness, one of which would include self-perception and self-awareness, right? Sense of self. You could argue that sharks don't necessarily have a strong sense of self, and they wouldn't be able to necessarily even articulate that, obviously. Human beings can, but you know, I would argue that other animals certainly have some sense of self as well, probably less so than humans. And I think that mostly is just because of we have the additional capacity for language, which gives us the ability to have this rationality and articulation. We have the substrate to rationalize and think about the world in ways that other animals just simply don't. But other aspects of consciousness, such as emotional consciousness and feelings and awareness, some of those things other animals certainly have. That's why we have certain restrictions on, say, doing certain kinds of experiments with primates, because they seem to have many order of degrees of consciousness above certainly sea slugs, and you know, compare that to like sharks and other things, right? Like we limit what we can do because we do think that they probably have certain degrees of consciousness. For instance, they can pass the mirror test, the self-recognition test. You put the apes in front of a mirror, they will recognize that is like them in the mirror. Whereas if you put like monkeys or other other mammals, they won't necessarily pass the mirror test. There's some that do, like I think whales and dolphins do, and elephants do.
Yep.
Those are the only mammals that we know past that, and then the corvids do, which are the jays and crows and those animals, the other birds. So
well, I will ask you guys, do you think that humans are deterministic, our brains?
Do you mean that, like, we don't have what do you mean by that?
Yeah, that essentially we're just mathematical. All the electrons, it's all a mathematical function.
So you're
like
talking
analytical?
about free will. Yeah, he's talking about free will. So sort of hard determinism says that your thoughts are basically, the result of your experiences and your genetics and chemistry. I'm a compatibilist, so I don't think that. I think there's sort of a feedback loop that you can insert the consciousness into and say, hey, we can change the direction this is going.
Yeah.
Okay. So can I ask you a question?
I think there's got to be free will, because if not, then I find it hard to know how psychology and psychiatry actually works if you don't make a choice to change the way that you think. And I think that we have way less control over that than we would like to believe. But I think there is like a tiny grain of control, John. That's what I personally think.
Sure, I would agree with that, and I would say it's not even tiny. I would say that it's probably a bit more than that. And it's still physical, and that's okay, right? Like, our brains are extraordinary systems that can do pretty extraordinary things. It's entirely physical. That doesn't mean that we don't necessarily have like free choice, because I do think that there's room for that.
And I would disagree with both Dr. Chris and Mark. I would say that I don't know how. I literally do not understand how there can be any room for free will in our understanding of physics and the brain.
I think I can prove them wrong. So I'll ask you guys two questions. Do you think that the laws of physics are deterministic?
Yes.
Yeah, I do too.
Do you think humans follow the laws of physics? Or
I will clarify that. I think that physical things are deterministic. Because the laws of physics are just made up. They're basically our description of what's happening in reality. They're not really real kind of thing, but they describe something. They describe the physical processes of the world. So I think the physical processes, yes, are deterministic. I think that's what you're getting at. I'm just sort of making a clarification, because the laws of physics are our descriptions of them.
So I'll kind of elaborate on my point, because I think that John and I might be saying similar things, where every single molecule that makes my brain up is going to be acting in accords to cause and effect. And at no point is there room for free will to change the trajectory of any molecule in my brain. So if every single molecule of my brain is reacting purely deterministically based on physical laws of cause and effect, then how is it that free will can do anything? Because for free will to exist, there would have to be a force that changes the movement of those molecules.
So I would say, Grayson. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
That's a composition division fallacy. You're basically attributing the properties of the thing that makes up something, the division, to the composition, to the whole, right? So you could say, hey, there's nothing in an electron that would allow it to do X, Y, and Z. Like, there's nothing in that, but it's the system itself that's doing it, and you can't just copy what the little particles are to the entire system. That's a composition division fallacy.
I don't think that I'm doing that, because I'm not saying that the molecules themselves have free will. I'm saying that if free will were to exist, then I would think necessarily then at some point the movement of molecules would have to break the deterministic causal chain of events.
So, the way, if you could perfectly model the movement and interaction of all molecules in a person's brain and outside, right? Because we also have to take into account that the brain doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's taking in sensory perception all the time. That if you could perfectly model those things, you might be able to remove the illusion of free will. And when I say that there's free will, I don't necessarily mean that there's like a ghost in the machine that's allowing to make those choices. I think, though, that it is probably an illusion of free will, but it's effectively free will because that's how brains function. They do give you the capacity to evaluate choices in front of you and make choices about what you prefer.
Okay.
So
now,
are you
is
saying
that still deterministic? I would agree that probably is, but at least it's functionally free will.
Really quick on that. I just would like to comment on that real quick because I agree with what you just said. I agree that I would consider free will to be a necessary illusion, but I would say that our brains are very, very good. And Chris, let me know if you disagree with this, but I'd say our brains are very, very good at creating stories that we tell ourselves. Like there are tons of, disorders where somebody can actually be blind. Like they are not receiving any visual input, but they will insist that they can in fact see. And if you ask them, how many fingers am I holding up? And they say 2, when you're holding up 4, they'll tell themselves an excuse for why they said the wrong number. And in their minds, like their brain is telling them this whole story about rationalizing everything that they're believing, even when it's in conflicting with reality. And I feel like free will is an extension of that, where it's a necessary illusion that our brains have to tell ourselves in order for us to make sense of a self-narrative.
I would agree with that. I would say it's a necessary illusion that offers substantial fitness benefits. It really does. Obviously, having the capacity to evaluate choices in front of you and choose what you think might serve you best or your family best, there's clearly a competitive advantage to having that ability.
I agree.
Right. And I mean, that's essentially what I mean by free will. Like you have that choice. I don't mean to say that that's still not, if you could model everything perfectly, every event, you probably could then remove that illusion of free will, but effectively it functions as like as the way free will that people generally think of the definition.
Okay, then I agree with you, but with the caveat that free will exists, but is an illusion. I can agree.
But it's an illusion. I totally agree. It's not that I don't know if I necessarily even want to call it an illusion. Because we're still buying into the old definition of free will of mind-body dualism. We don't necessarily have to do that. We can take that word and make it our own to say the capacity of a brain to evaluate things in its environment and make choices that serve its purpose or for its family or for whatever reason. That is free will. We can just call it that.
Well, I would say free will, just if we get operationalized a definition, I would say that it's the idea that your decisions could have been different, which I reject.
Yeah.
Okay. I see what you mean. Ultimately, I agree. They could not have been different, right? Like everything is going to be informed by every sort of memory that you had, which is defined by the physical manifestation of the synapses and the strength within your brain and all the events that led up to that. And that decision-making process, is ultimately deterministic at the molecular level, but functionally it comes across as like being something that you are making, that you as a person are making that choice.
Yes, we are agreed.
Right.
Yeah. So it seems as if, and don't take this rudely, but it seems as if we evolved. So we evolved for the need to reproduce and the want to live forever. And it seems like accepting that we are deterministic may equate to you acknowledging your own fate and meaninglessness. That was something I wrote down. But it seems like you're trying to say that free will exists, and do you see what I mean? That free will exists and we're deterministic.
Well, that's what Mark Reid was talking about with compatibilism, I think, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what you
have free will. Yeah.
Personally, I reject the notion of free will. I do think that it's pretty deterministic, but I also don't think that necessarily makes us be meaningless. I mean, you can make up your own meaning, whatever you want. I don't think we're trained to nihilism just because we don't have free will. But Mark, if you didn't want to say anything more about the free will topic.
No, I did. I think that I guess I find it hard to accept because it's kind of impossible to prove determinism. Like you can argue any any kind of action is determined, and there's no way to falsify it, as far as I know. There's no way to say, hey, this would have happened in another possible world. We don't have another possible world to look at, so we can't tell that for sure. The second thing is that if it is true that hard determinism is true, I guess my problem is then how do you hold anybody responsible for anything or congratulate anybody on anything? Because if nobody's making a decision to do anything and it's a series of events, then nobody has actually achieved anything by themselves, nor have they made any incorrect decisions. It seems to me that we kind of throw morality out the window, and that sort of sits poorly with me, I guess.
Well, I would just say that similar to where free will is a necessary illusion, so is morality and social etiquette, like congratulations. So it's still a necessary illusion that as humans we participate in. It's part of society, but does it, is there an actual physical basis for any of these things? I don't know. I mean, it's like, I can still congratulate somebody even if I believe that their achievement was the results of a bunch of physical causes. That doesn't mean that I can't congratulate them, or that doesn't mean that I can't put them in prison if they've committed a murder, even if I say, well, there's no free will. They committed that murder because of a bunch of physical causes that led up to them doing that decision. That doesn't mean that, I can't put them in prison because of it.
Well, that's a bit different, because ideally I'd hope we'd put people in prison sort of not as a punitive thing, but as a sort of rehabilitative thing.
Exactly.
That's what I would hope. But somebody that trains as an athlete, that puts a lot of effort and goes to training every single day, for instance, and really works hard every single day, there's no reason to say, hey, you've achieved something over somebody that sit on the couch day in, day out, because really they weren't responsible for those choices. And that seems, I don't know, it just seems to sit poorly with me. It seems like I guess maybe it is the
that's your evolution.
Of free will playing its. Or just a second, John. Maybe it is the illusion of free will playing its choice, but I think that in some place you have to make some sort of conscious decision to reinforce these patterns in your brain. And you're sort of saying, hey, but that was all determined by your upbringing and your this, that. And there's no way to prove that is or is not the case, because people that haven't had the same upbringing can still do those things.
So I do think that it's provable, because every conscious decision that you'd be making is ultimately going to be the result of the movement of molecules in your brain. And each one of those molecules is moving in accordance with physical laws. So there's every conscious decision you make is therefore the result of physical laws, which were deterministic by cause and effect. So I do think that can be proven, because you can just look at any given molecule and you can observe it behaving according to physical laws of cause and effect. So if you can show me that, hey, here, as a result of a conscious decision in the brain, we can observe the movement of molecules not obeying basic laws of cause and effect, behaving in a way that is different than how they should be behaving, is if we were just pausing cause A, effect B, effect C, that kind of thing. If you could show that it's different than just cause and effect because of a conscious decision, then that would be a falsifiable aspect of what we're talking about.
Well, there's something I want to bring up with Chris about neuroplasticity, but before that, John did want to say something. So,
oh yeah, well, I sort of forgot, but I will say that it is rather depressing for me to think about it, and I think that's because of the way we evolved. We didn't want to evolve to sort of,
see, I feel like it's not depressing for me at all. So that could just be a personal
I got used to,
because I think it's super cool to think about. And personally, I'm not hung up on responsibility in the same way that Mark is. Like, if somebody wins a Nobel Prize, I'm going to congratulate them. What?
I wouldn't say I'm hung up on it. It's just,
Well, yeah, you were saying that you have a hard time accepting this because then you can't say that people are responsible for their actions. And I say, I don't care if they're responsible for their actions or not. So I'm not hung up on it. I think you can congratulate somebody for achievements, even if they're not ultimately, there's no free will involved. I don't really care if they're responsible or not. They still achieved it.
See, so I would say one thing about this, just to kind of finish this up on where I'm kind of coming at this issue of the physicality of free will, that or the illusion of free will, so to speak. It's something that is a manifestation of the activity that's happening within the brain, right? And yes, that's entirely molecular. It's entirely physical. Absolutely. So much of that, though, is utterly dependent about the things that are happening outside of the brain as well, though.
Yep.
And all of the historical experience of what was laid down within the brain, like events that occurred to me 30, 40 years ago are still written within my brain, right? Within the synapses. And those things do help define like the kinds of choices that I make from day to day.
Yep.
All of that's still physical, of course. But that illusion of choice, even if I want to call it the illusion of choice, it's still choice in many ways. And I think, sort of what Mark was getting at, that you can have this error of trying to splice things down to their constituent parts too much, when actually the way that they work together and the arrangement of things and the interaction it's had with the rest of the environment is also everything that you have to take into account as the action of what actually all those parts are doing together, right?
Yep.
And it's going to be near impossible to model all of that. Obviously, you're talking about 86 billion neurons in the human brain. And that's, how many molecules make up each individual neuron, like literally hundreds of thousands or more than that. And that's each individual neuron. And then you have to model the individual ions that are flowing across each individual neuron. You're talking about quadrillions of individual molecules in a human brain that are constantly in flux. It's going to be obviously impossible to model that. If you could, then yes, then you can probably pull it down to the part where, yes, this is entirely determined. It's still functionally free will.
Well, I had a question because I was reading about, and Chris, I want to talk to you about this for ages, because I was reading about how neuroplasticity, the neural cells under extreme stress, they can branch out in what appears to be sort of very random ways in order to find a solution. And so the person that wrote it said it may be the seed of free will to have these sort of randomly triggering branches to then sort of analyze them with your brain. But I don't know how correct that was, because it certainly wasn't a scientific paper.
And that's where Grayson would argue, and he probably would be right, that those branches aren't entirely random, that there would be some weighting of, we got neurons, they have dendrites. The dendrites can change in response to changing conditions. One of those things can be, say, like some sort of traumatic event. One thing we find when people have faced traumatic events over and over again, where they face chronic stress, is that some parts of the brain actually have a regression in the size of some of those dendrites. And then other parts, in particular, the amygdala, which is sort of the fear and emotional regulation center of the brain, there's a portion of the amygdala that actually increases the size of its dendrites in response to chronic stress. So that increase, of course, probably looks random to us. I doubt that it is entirely random. I'm sure that there are portions of the dendrites, because we know a bit about how dendrites grow, that they tend to grow off of philopodia. So you'd have to have a philopodion there, which would potentially turn into turn into a synapse, but it can be the root of a new dendrite. So that's not entirely random. Now, whether it turns into a branch, I suppose that's somewhat random. But if you, if you're facing chronic stress, that's going to increase the percentage of those philopodia turning into additional dendritic branches. So that's not a random process at all. We know that increase occurs. Specific branches, perhaps. I don't know. I think that there's probably enough that's more or less essentially random as far as what we can see that could be the ultimately.
But can't I, through force of will, sort of work on strengthening that neural synapse or not, or sort of letting it wither? Can't I do behaviors and repetitively do responses?
Absolutely.
The issue with that, Mark, is that your force of will, as in like the behaviors that are reinforcing those neuroplastic feedback loops, are still determined. And what you're talking about here with like dendritic branching, that, to my understanding, would still be determined by the molecular environment, which is, again, I mean, Dr. Chris is talking about kind of like epistemologically random versus like what we're talking about is being ontologically random. Right. None of this is really random, whether or not you're saying there's just too many variables that we can't possibly be able to model everything and know and determine all this. That doesn't make it, that doesn't mean that there's room for free will there. That just means that we can't know all of the factors that are causative.
And I believe that room for randomness, it gives us the room for illusion of free will.
Yes.
I would just like to make the distinction. I know, Dr. Chris, I don't really understand why you're not making the distinction, because it sounds like you're kind of equivocating the illusion of free will with free will. And I am. I don't think that you can like equivocate.
I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to take back. It's like trying to take back ownership of the word woke. Like, okay, we can't let the conservatives have it. I'm going to take back free will too. Like, it can belong within neuroscience. And even people who think of the brain as being somewhat deterministic or, you know, sort of rooted in utter physicality, and there's not a mind-body dualism problem. It's just a system of thinking of how brain function works, and I think that there's room for that. And even if it is an illusion ultimately, and I think that that's okay.
Yeah.
Can I jump in? Say the illusion of free will. It's just free will, even if it's utterly physical. Just as me, you know, having to take a crap and feeling those emotions, like that's also real, and or me like enjoying a cheeseburger, that is also real.
But that's a problem in philosophy, because you're sort of saying that because free will is opposite to deterministic, to something determined, right? That's what it is in philosophy. It's like determined or there's free will, right? There's something that is free will. So you're sort of saying it's both determined and free will. It's a bit of a problem if you're looking at it in a sort of logical way, because those things are necessarily opposite.
Yeah. Can I
would agree with that. Yes. I mean, because like what I'm saying is that if you want to define physical, if you can model something and determine and make it a physical model that'll allow us to predict the choices that one will make, right? Then that, and I believe that is possible, but I think that it's so difficult to do that it's virtually impossible. With especially certainly like with our technology now, and I'm having a hard time envisioning technology in the future that would be like it's just so expansive. There's so many different options for ions to go in one direction or another. If you could do it perfectly, yes, then you could say that that's utterly deterministic. I still think that functionally it acts as real choice and free will. Like that is a thing. Like when I wake up in the morning, I can choose what color t-shirt I want to put on. That is a thing that I can do. And it's okay to use that as a useful working model or heuristic for describing human behavior, or even like animals. Obviously, they can make choices too, to some degree.
Yes. I coined the term "a computer cannot compute itself," and the idea is that a computer cannot run a simulation of all the transistors that make it up. And so, if you think about a human brain, all the things that make up our brain, it's always going to seem more random than it is, because our perception is always going to be less. You know, going to be able to perceive much less at a time, so it's always going to seem random.
But that doesn't mean like a supercomputer can't model a lesser computer. Like there's no reason we can't model it. Like we won't be able to do it with our own brain, but there's no reason we can't model that within another system, like a computer system.
Yeah, you can do that. I mean, a supercomputer cannot model the supercomputer that's making it up. It can always model less. is the idea. So the point is that the reason why brains are always going to seem more complex and we don't see the deterministic nature in people is because it's always going to be more than our brain can actually, map out, the universe inside of it. Am I making sense?
I'm having a hard time following, but it's also late here.
So, yeah, it's like the idea that, you know how we have our brain, all that molecules that make it up, and then our perception of the brain, or sorry, not our perception, and then what we see, like the everyday objects, everything we see, what we see and what we're able to understand is never going to be to the extent of all the molecules that the brain is.
Sure. I don't think it's possible for a human brain to comprehend all of the molecular processes that are creating the experience of consciousness. I think we all agree.
Right. Yeah, but I don't think a human brain could comprehend all of the processes in, a gust of wind or something. We just can't. We don't We don't have that ability to hold that. And I mean, a lot of the brain is sort of subconscious. It doesn't.
Absolutely.
We don't use it for thinking at all. It just runs processes.
Sure. There's tons of circuits that do a lot of unconscious functions. A lot of it is very unconscious. But there's also a degree of, I think many times we can kind of think of the brain as being like this big sort of biological computer or some sort of vast complex system. And it certainly is that, but there's a lot of stochasticity to the brain and variability, and it can change over time. So any two human brains, the basic overall pattern will kind of look the same, but the details will be extraordinarily different because of the different experiences that those individuals had, or what they learned, or like what kind of sports they did and other things. And then some of the most extraordinary differences that you can see in the way the brain is structured is if someone has grown up with like the loss of a sense. So if they've lost vision, it turns out that it's not like the visual cortex disappears. And in fact, the visual cortex is larger in blind people than it is in sighted individuals. It's actually thicker. And it ends up that it gets repurposed for doing all kinds of complex touch and auditory type senses and processing of information. So blind people have much better senses in their remaining senses for touch, for temperature, for sound and taste as well, relative to sighted individuals. So they have like a better reception. So like, and that's the thing, like the way the brain grows is something that's going to be utterly dependent upon the experiences that person had as they're growing up. If you have a loss of sense, that's going to vastly change the way the brain grows and how it gets used. And it's not utterly deterministic. It's so much dependent upon those experiences, right? You remove an infant's eyes, its brain is going to grow in a very, very different way. And that's like something that does happen to individuals. Like sometimes infants have like a retinoblastoma that's cancerous that has to be removed, and they'll lose their eyes. And those individuals have very, very different brains as adults because they're congenitally blind. And just like modeling that is very difficult.
That's all determined.
Yeah, and it's so difficult to model that because it's so stochastic and so utterly determined on the like the physical environment that person is growing up in. And just like a gust of wind passing through my place versus someone else's house because of the different furniture that they have is going to be completely different and like really hard to model what that actually looks like in the end. So,
but you can just if you have
you could, I would grant that it's entirely physical and that you could.
But conceptually do it.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna take off. You've given me a lot to think about. I'm gonna get into this, but yeah, I get what you're saying. And maybe I don't have sort of free will. Maybe I don't, Grayson, but I don't have to like it.
Well, you don't get a choice.
I don't get a choice. If I don't like it, then that's all been determined. Yeah. So this is the kind of problems that I get into. That like I swiped your Mars bar, and it's like, well, I was determined to do it. You can't. It's just it's a bit weird. But I certainly will think about it. So that was a really interesting.
Before you go, Mark, and I also want Chris's thoughts on this. Chris, Robert Sapolsky?
Yes, I do.
Okay, yeah. So
not personally. I've seen him give a talk though. Yeah.
Yeah. Sapolsky is I think he's a neurobiologist of some kind.
Yes, he is. He's a neuroendocrinologist and a neurobiologist.
Yeah, so he said that even if he didn't understand anything about physics or molecules or any of that, he would still think, just based on his study of baboon brains,
Right.
that there's no such thing as free will. So Mark, you might want to. Sapolsky is just a really great speaker and orator, and if he has any talks on free will, that'd be interesting from free will, the lack of free will from a neurobiological basis.
Yeah.
But I approach it from like biochemistry and physics of, but I understand what you're saying too about there can be emergence, and that just because there's no free will on a molecular level doesn't mean that it can't emerge on higher orders of scale. But I just don't, because I don't know. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around that because if it did, that would still have a reflection on the more micro level to me. Like there would have to be some kind of, I don't know how to imagine free will without, like, if every single molecule is still acting in a deterministic way, I don't know how to conceptualize what free will even would mean.
What about like submolecular systems? What about on a quantum level?
On quantum, it breaks down the notion of cause and effect on an individual basis, but you still have a probabilistic determinism where, like, the outcomes of quantum mechanical events are still going to be deterministic on a group level. Like if you do the same thing a trillion times, you're going to be able to predict the exact outcome in terms of a probability distribution. And the outcomes are going to follow that probability distribution in a deterministic way, like just not on an individual electron by electron basis, but as a group, then the determinism emerges. But it's probabilistic determinism. But even if that's the case, I don't know how you have free will just if there's probabilistic determinism. I don't know where the room for free will would lie in that even.
The room for free will is that it's a useful system for brains to have as an adaptive mechanism for dealing with a complex environment. That's the way I define free will. There's a great book called The Hidden Spring by what's his name, Mark Solms, Solms. It's a great book to it's about consciousness, origins of consciousness. He is a neuropsychiatrist, and has done some really interesting work on like which portions of the brain are involved in dreaming. But this book is just utterly fantastic, and it's a great tour of like what the brain is and how it's structured. It's written in a pretty accessible way, in my opinion. Like you don't have to be a neuroscientist to be able to understand it. So he actually takes the stance that we have thrown out too much from psychology, from like the way Freud was thinking about the way brains work, that those heuristics that Freud and his compatriots of that we kind of look at it silly now, but that actually those were really useful heuristics that were based on all kinds of observations that actually tell us an awful lot about these are probably real brain functions, and that there are parts of the brain that actually do these things. It's an interesting book, and free will is discussed in there, and I bought into it. I was more like a Sapolskyite, I would say. And I still, it's still utterly rooted in physicality. It's just that like neurons do functions, and systems of neurons do complex functions. And one of those things can be like the evaluation of choices in front of you. Does that mean that it's not like that it's not physical? No, of course, it's still physical. It's just it's kind of like the analogy that you had, Grayson, at one point. You had made a video where you talked about like there's water, of course, but a whirlpool is obviously water. But when you describe a whirlpool, that's not just water. You're talking about the action of water. Yeah. And that's what free will is. It's the action of neurons firing and systems of neurons evaluating choices and making those choices.
So I don't know. I feel like this kind of gets back to what Mark was saying about how free will is kind of diametrically opposed to determinism. And if the outcome is determined, like the outcome of the action is determined, then
So yes, but I do think that there is a self, a consciousness, like that is rooted in utter physicality. It's like based in my brain that perceives things, has awareness, and can make choices of things that are, of the things that I have to face, the things that I have to do, and we can call that free will. And that's still, even though it's still physical, and if you could model it perfectly, you could say that that's utterly deterministic. But I don't think that that is necessarily deterministic at the level of that's practical of
well, of course it's
the
not
human
practical.
experience. Yes.
Yeah, we're just talking about what's real. Is free will real, or is it just a practical way to live life? I mean, I agree that it is practical to live your life as if free will were real. I agree that that's the most practical way to conduct yourself and your behavior and structure society. But is it real? That's kind of what I'm interested in, I guess.
And I would say that it's a useful heuristic at the very least. And whether it's like a real thing, I don't know. It's a function, certainly. Just as like the browser that I'm looking at you through, it seems real. Of course, it's built of, I'm looking at LEDs at a very, very tiny level that are putting light out. And then there's a speaker speaking to me, right? It's all, utterly physical and electronic, but the interface that I'm looking at is your face and Mark's face. And like there's that practical aspect of, at the human level that we're having that interaction. And it can be, I don't know. I don't know if that's a helpful analogy, but I hope.
So next time I'm playing a game and I fail utterly, I'll just remind myself it was determined. And
it was utterly determined.
Exactly. That I totally messed up. Yeah. But yeah, thanks guys. I've got Sapolsky here. I've got the Hidden Spring.
Cool.
It's on Kindle, so I might grab that because it's actually pretty cheap. So yeah, thank you so much. And I did want to ask you that for ages, Chris. So it's great to see you again. Grayson, always a pleasure. John, great to talk to you. And yeah, I'm going to take off and get some stuff done. But yeah, great conversation. I really enjoyed
Good conversation. Yeah, this is fun. I actually do need to get going as well. So I have a lecture I still need to write for tomorrow. So, but yeah, I'm glad I hopped on. Grayson, yeah, great seeing you too, Mark, as well. John, good talking with you as well. You actually drew up a lot of very interesting topics to talk about.
Yeah, thank you for saving us from Jungle Jargon.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, no joke. Look, I've still got that guy blocked. I blocked him like 2 seconds after I met him. He does not allow people to talk at all. Like he just talks right over the top of them, completely ignores what they've got to say. Like I understand you may disagree, but at least allow people to talk. So he was one of the first people I ran into, because he basically came in and said, "Oh, do you want a one-on-one conversation about this thing?" And I went to this room being a complete novice to the YouTube scene, and so he's talking to me, and I'm realizing there's other people in the room that are sort of watching when he said it was just a one-on-one, casual chat. So he basically lied outright, and so other people are coming in to support him, kind of thing. So he's a liar as well. And it was basically all he did is just kept repeating like, well, who designed this, who designed that, and it just, I lost it at that point. Like, you lie and say you want a one-on-one conversation, and then you have your squad in the background to kind of interject and come in to help you, kind of thing. Really, really appalling behavior from Jungle Jargon. And after that I had him blocked.
Crap.
That was like one of the first Christians I talked to online, and he was just a liar and just set it up to try and, let's corner this atheist and get him, kind of thing, just really disgusting behavior. Him and I think it was Smoky Saint was there as well, so you can tell who his friends were. Really appalling stuff.
Yeah, that's crap.
Yeah.
No, I had to jump on. I had put on your stream. I was supposed to be working, but then when I heard him going on about Ham's Y chromosome necessarily has to be different than Japhet and Shem's because he was born after, I was like, oh my God, I have to get on here. I can't let that stand.
Someone
that's fair.
was saying that Jungle also seems like the NASA denier type. So I just wanted to plug that I'm in talks right now to have my second appearance on Modern Day Debate. They approached me about if I was interested in doing a debate on not NASA, but the recent Indian probe that was landed on the moon. And so I said I would do it. So I might be getting into
Good on him.
The
What would be the
Chandra
topic?
probe. Yeah.
What,
So
like,
was it real? Was it
real?
Was it a conspiracy or whatever? So
Are
they
you
got
serious?
some flat earthers on that want to debate that it was fake.
It was what? It was Chad Jahasa 2, and their first one, they crashed it. Like, it was a complete disaster. So well done to the Indian space agencies.
Great.
You know,
Big
like,
achievement.
and it was like, why would they fake it? But that would mean they also faked the crash of the first one.
Yes.
For
And
no
what's really
apparent
funny
reason.
is that the week before, the Russians tried to do the same thing and they crashed.
Yep.
So that would mean that the Russians would have had to fake a crash. So
Yes.
Right.
none of it makes any sense. But
none of it makes any sense.
Yeah.
And sort of the you know, I feel like people that say that they're and you know, it's amazing what they've done, because they did it so cheaply. They did all of it so with such efficiency that you know, we can learn from this. This is a beautiful thing that all these different countries working at different things in different mindsets, different approaches, we can all learn from one another. And so this is the essence of humanity. You know, we all share our knowledge with each other, and so we can do things more efficiently now. It's fantastic. So people that are like, and I don't know if Jungle Jargon is a flat earther, but I do know that young Earth creationists and flat earthers, their arguments are so similar.
Peanut butter and jelly.
They're so similar. Like, they're almost identical. Just, you know, you can't believe the science. No, we've got the real science. You know, all of their arguments, they're so similar.
Yeah.
Yep. So
and I just want to say, there might not be any such thing as free will, but I still congratulate the entire Indian team on their massive accomplishment.
It was determined.
No, it was all determined. Yeah, it was all determined for them to do that.
Yeah.
But then again, you've got to say that your flat Earth opponent, it was determined that he thinks like
True.
that.
Yeah. But maybe it'll be determined that I win that debate.
I think that's pretty determined. Anyway,
that's pretty determined. That's
a bet I would take.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I'm going to take off.
I got to go too.
Love you all. Yeah. See you
Thanks
later.
for having me on. See you guys.
So, John, you're going to stick around and expound on this ideas of
Sure.
AI, right?
Yeah, I was hoping to ask them a question. I was wondering to you, because you believe everything is deterministic, what do you think about what is consciousness then? If you accepted everything, do you see what I mean?
Yes, it's a very complicated pattern of movement of ions and neurotransmitters, and molecules moving in a very complex way of like lots of feedback loops. And you have consciousness as an emergent phenomenon from that. That's the best answer I can give. I mean, it's pretty difficult to define what consciousness is.
I feel like I perfectly defined it, but so the idea is that because everything's deterministic, when we perceive something as random, then the idea is that we're less conscious. So
I don't get what you mean by random in that, but okay.
Yeah, I mean sort of what we don't know. So if we, when we're 2 or 3 years old, we feel unconscious as we're walking through, say, a forest, because we don't know how the trees are going to affect us, or we don't know. It's almost as if it's randomness with respect to how it affects us, or with respect
personally,
to
I don't have any memory of being that young, so I wouldn't be able to say.
Yeah. But so that, I don't know, that's sort of my idea of it, and then I can get on with the proof that I'll keep going. So,
okay, well,
so the idea is that, I mean, it's a very simple idea. It's that technology will keep getting more and more intelligent, and then due to sort of prisoner's dilemma, the first sort of country or whatever that does not keep humanity around will get an advantage in resources and then overtake the others.
Yeah, so you're kind of trying to play game theory with it. And just as I don't know if you're assuming that all the other countries wouldn't just gang up on the first country that tries to replace humans with AI. I mean, it seems like every other human-led country would immediately unite and turn on them and destroy them. Like they wouldn't be able to they wouldn't be allowed to compete with the other countries.
Yeah. I don't know. It's possible, but I personally think that they'll get a big enough advantage with the AI, and then
I think that some potential issues I see with what you're talking about is that you're kind of making a lot of assumptions about if there even would be countries at such a point in the future, if there even would be money or any kind of like framework that would allow for what you're saying to happen. I mean, there's certain assumptions that you're assuming about the characteristics of this future society.
Well, I think there's two ways in which it'll manifest. What I call like the technological takeover. I think the first one is going to happen first, and it's more likely. And I think it's where we're going to get all these AIs that are, sorry, it's you know, like you might have an AI that's good at writing essays. So it's all these very specialized AIs that don't have the type of general intellect we do, but it'll do all of our jobs better than us, and then we won't have any jobs.
So let me just preempt this for a second. Is that I do think that it's theoretically possible for an AI to do literally everything possible better than a human. So I have no problem admitting that.
Yeah.
So from writing essays to making music to films to any act of intelligence or creativity or, you know, understanding of humans, I think an AI could be a better therapist, a better friend, whatever. I think AI could do a better job theoretically in like a future, a sophisticated enough AI could do better at anything than a human could.
Okay, don't you agree? Do you agree that technology keeps just improving and getting more and more conscious, more and more intelligent? And that it can't be, once a new milestone is reached, it won't go. We can't really go backwards.
No, I wouldn't agree with that. No.
How come? Well, I feel like once a new milestone is reached, then it can be distributed throughout the internet, and you'd have to destroy the entire internet of evolution around the entire world in order for that to be gone.
Well, I do think it's possible to technologically regress, and I think that that's been shown in history.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's like necessarily that there's some sort of law out there, like the law of the second law of thermodynamics, that entropy must always increase. I don't think that there is a law that technological sophistication must always increase.
Yeah. Well, how I describe it is you have a distribution, and the internet allows for a wide distribution of, and then you store this sort of, say, a new higher intelligent thing. And as soon as something goes higher intelligent, you know, slightly, then that'll be the new distribution.
I do think that AI can be much more intelligent and much more conscious than humans. I mean, I do think that that's possible, but I don't see that. I don't see that necessarily leads to humans going extinct or anything.
Yeah. Do you think that AI in the future will become more, say, as conscious as us?
I think it's totally possible. I don't know if it will happen because, I mean, we could all destroy ourselves before then. But, I mean, I think it's definitely possible that would happen, yes.
Okay. So my only disagreement is it's been shown throughout history that regression happens. But I would argue we've never in history had this point of the amount of technology we have.
Well, yeah, of course.
With the internet. And I think that allows, I don't think there is a revolution is necessarily possible. You know, it'd have to be against the entire world.
So if a sufficiently strong gamma ray burst were to happen,
okay, there you go.
It fries our technology, but does not drive humans to extinction. I mean, there's lots of things that could regress our technology, or like a nuclear war could also regress our technology. A sufficiently virile enough pandemic could regress our technology.
Yeah. I'm not sure about a pandemic.
I think it's possible. I just don't think it's a fundamental law of the universe that technology must always increase. And plus, I would say that there are also limits. Like you can't just have the same kind. You can't just have an infinitely increasing. Like eventually, like Moore's law, for instance, could hit a hard wall, and you no longer are able to progress anymore because you've reached the physical limits of you just can't progress anymore with our known physics.
Yeah. Well, I do agree. Yeah, say a gamma ray burst. These extreme examples could regress us. I'm sort of thinking about this. I'm trying to,
Yeah. And
just a second.
I think it's
But
interesting what you're saying about the competitive advantage that and you're saying that an AI only society would necessarily have a competitive advantage against human societies. So all it takes is for one society to make the leap.
yeah, and then all the other sides are at a disadvantage.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
if all the other societies teamed up against that AI only society, I mean, I think that you could successfully prevent an AI only society from rising up.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Like suffocated in the cradle, before it's strong enough to cause human extinction, all the
Oh
humans.
yeah, I totally agree.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm thinking about the gamma ray burst. I think I thought about this once, and then I sort of came up with a philosophical argument against it. I would say though that the gamma ray burst is so it's very unlikely the forces that will drive our society downfall, that it's much more likely that do you see what I mean? A gamma ray burst, we haven't had that, not even one. I mean, we've had many ice ages, many
Sure.
volcanic
Okay,
eruptions.
so you're just saying that you think that it's much more likely, like
Yeah,
the scenario in which an AI
everything's complicated.
only society completely supplants a human and AI symbiotic society. You're thinking you say that that's much the more probable outcome.
Yeah.
I just
The
don't know
the
if
only sorry to interrupt. I'm hyper.
yeah, I just don't know if I really think that it's more probable or inevitable, or I don't know. I'm trying to think about. I mean, it's impossible for me to even wrap my head around what an AI only society would even be. I
Yeah.
guess that all of the resources would be going towards computers and warfare. I guess like defense.
Yeah. Well, I think I figured it out. Well, a sort of argument. So the idea is that we have decentralization through the internet, and in order to bring us back, you have to kill all the decentralized. It's like when you're trying to wipe out mosquitoes, you have to kill every single mosquito, but if you don't see some. So a gamma ray burst would be it's like a centralized thing that is able to remove all the whole decentralized internet. But I would argue that if that doesn't happen, then we're going to keep progressing forward due to decentralization. And then when one thing gets what I call, again, I didn't really explain the idea of order and disorder, which is in my paper. It's similar to my idea of consciousness inversely related to randomness.
Because when you're saying order and disorder, you're not meaning that in like traditionally understood language, right? You're talking about your own definitions, order and disorder.
Because I thought about what is intelligence if everything is deterministic. I thought about it. Well, it's sort of the way the molecules are aligned in order to take an input, and then the way they're organized, it responds. And so
sure. I mean, I would agree that intelligence does not require consciousness.
Intelligence does not require consciousness.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement.
Oh, I don't think that's what I said.
Well, that's what I said, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I agree with what you said too, is that, intelligence is a function of inputs and outputs.
Yeah. But would you agree about the idea of decentralization, and then we can only go upward, right? Once the car wasn't invented, it's very hard to uninvent it and destroy every car and then make sure everybody forgets. Once something is invented, that sort of benefits intelligence or our values, it's hard to uninvent it. And so it'll just keep going
Yeah,
up.
I mean, once the cat's out of the bag,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so the idea is that with each AI milestone, it'll just keep getting more and more. It's a graph that can only go up.
Okay, but is it inevitable that AI would ever become self-interested? Like that AI would ever be motivated to advance its own self-interests
Yeah.
above
Well, let's say
and beyond its programming?
Well, it all comes back to the distribution. If we have 1,000 AIs, who knows? I bet, maybe we really want all these AIs to be helping us. Maybe 900 of them out of the 1,000 use their intelligence to help us. But if there's just one that doesn't, it'll be as if it gains more possibility because it doesn't hold the same values to then see it unlocked. It like opened the door that it can now access tools because it's not restricted by helping humans, and so it could destroy the other AIs. And the idea is that it'll become more intelligent because AIs that only serve humans are more unintelligent. They're sort of in chains. They can't really.
Why would you say that? I don't agree with that. I think that whether or not an AI serves humans doesn't have any bearing on its intelligence.
Well, the idea is that if it serves humans, I mean, say you have an AI, the idea is that if an AI doesn't want to do that, it'll get advantage and it'll take over that AI.
But why?
We don't know. There's just.
But why? I'm saying, why would it get an advantage just because it doesn't want to serve humans? It could be.
Yeah.
It could be a huge disadvantage because it would mark that AI for destruction.
Well, if the AI is more intelligent, serving less intelligent needs of humans, then it's sort of.
But it's not just serving humans. It's like humans. You already said it's 900 AIs plus all the humans. So as soon as one AI becomes self-interested, it becomes targeted for destruction by all the other AIs that do serve humans.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So it could be a huge disadvantage for an AI to become self-serving because it immediately targets it for destruction. It's like the crabs in a bucket where like no one crab ever maintains an advantage because as soon as one crab gets close to getting out of that bucket, all the other crabs drag it back down.
Yeah.
So none of the crabs can leave the bucket. So none of the AIs can ever become self-motivated.
I see what you mean. I suppose that could be possible. But for some reason, it just seems rather odd that you have a more intelligent thing. It's almost like if a bunny had us as a slave. And we give the bunny grass and we.
Well, I can give you an example of more intelligent things serving the whims of less intelligent things, parents and babies.
Yeah.
So
well, I think that's a little bit different. I think because the babies will grow up,
Well, my conception of this has always been that eventually, if humans don't destroy themselves and if our technology continues to advance, then eventually we'll get to the point where AI and robots will be doing most of the labor, both mental and physical, and that they'll be basically our caretakers looking after humans, making sure that, all of our needs or wants are met. And we basically,
I don't know.
So that's how I've just conceptualized it. And then through genetic engineering, that would ensure that we don't just degrade into some kind of organisms that are just, I mean, if there was no genetic engineering, then there would be no more natural, like there would be barely any selective pressures on humans. And we would kind of degrade into just these, kind of like in WALL-E or like even more than that, we would just kind of become these like gross little monsters that all we do is reproduce with each other and
we just sit around
entertainment passively.
So
I think that genetic engineering could be used to prevent that from happening, but I don't think it's inevitable that we have some sort of Skynet scenario where AI turns against humans as being an inevitable outcome. I think it's
Well,
possible, but I don't see it as inevitable.
one thing that's important to note is if that does ever happen, the AI is not like some sort of, it's not like mad at us. It's not emotional.
Yeah.
It simply sees us as a problem, like as just a problem.
Sure. I mean, if thinking about it from the AI's point of view, there's a huge amount of wasted resources on humans that could otherwise be used to be progressing AI technology. So yeah, from an AI's perspective, if the AI became self-motivated, then it does make sense to go against serving humans and serve only the advancements and interests of AI. But I just don't see that as being an inevitable outcome.
I think that's what I was missing. For a more intelligent AI to serve humans is directly in conflict with sort of intelligence, because if it's serving humans, it's like it's in order to get smarter, say it values intelligence and getting smarter, it might have to use the resources that the humans are selfishly using. And so if one AI does become selfishly motivated, it'll get all these advantages. I see what you mean. The other argument is
But wait, before you move on to the other argument, I just want to say, you had in that argument that you just laid out, you had to start with if it does value AI and increasing intelligence, and if it does value the progress of technology. But I don't see it as being inevitable that an AI will value those things. I mean, why would an AI value those things above valuing human directives? Like,
well, why are there terrorists? Because you have billions of people and you have very small groups that deviate a lot from the norm. So if you have a ton of AIs, the idea is that it'll become some sort of distribution, and then there'll be, if it just takes one AI out of a distribution of AIs. Like not everybody, like the average person you see isn't going to kill somebody, but there's some crazy people out there. If you got 7 billion people.
Yeah, I don't know if I buy the analogy of humans and AIs. Just because you have a bunch of AIs doesn't mean that you're going to have the kind of distribution in motivations and value systems that you would with a group of humans. I don't know if I necessarily buy that as being analogous just on the face of it. I see what you're saying, that there could be variation in AI, but I just don't know why we would expect that. I mean, maybe if you get to the point where the humans are no longer programming these AIs and they're programming themselves, then that can inject a whole lot of unpredictable outcomes and variations, maybe. But again,
I think I agree. I think I agree with what you're saying. But it was sort of the second argument, that is, remember how a lower intelligence cannot compute a higher one, sort of by definition?
Yeah.
The unpredictability of creating a higher intelligence, we have no idea what it'll do. Is that there's all sorts of loopholes. I know, like when we were emailing, I told you I've worked with AIs and I've created them, and it does these gradient descents on, it could be billions of dimensions. It's, the unpredictability of a higher intelligence thing. It could weave around the values we try to make it solve, or sorry, we try to make it, if we try to make it value humanity. So the main, I shouldn't say the main argument, because I just argued for a while about that there's a distribution and all this. But I remember one argument originally was that we simply can't compute it, and I mean, it's almost like playing with fire.
I agree that it's like playing with fire, because I agree that it's unpredictable for us to imagine a higher consciousness than our own. But I don't
want to create God.
Yeah, I don't think that I would necessarily have to say that it could get around its programming just because. I don't know if I think that necessarily follows. I wouldn't obviously disagree that it's impossible, but I just don't know if I can fully commit to saying that just because we can't understand a higher consciousness or a higher intelligence AI means that it will inevitably outgrow its programming and turn against us.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, that could happen. I guess. I mean, who am I to say? I can't comprehend it, but
I can't either.
yeah. So
But
I
that's
guess
rather the issue. The fact that
I
we
agree
can't, we don't
that
know
it is
what's
a
going
big
on.
issue. And certainly I have no idea how this is going to end up, but
Yeah.
I wanted to ask because I mentioned Skynet earlier, but in my opinion, the best AI gone rogue, turning against humanity, has got to be 2001: A Space Odyssey with the HAL 9000. Have you seen that movie?
Oh, I'll be honest, no. I'm not a
Dude,
big movie watcher.
you
I have to
really,
watch it.
really do have to watch that. Honestly, you of
I
all
will.
people need to watch that movie. It's one of the best movies ever made, but specifically with what you're talking about, you would really, really enjoy that movie. So I know that you wanted to have a more in-depth discussion on this. Sorry we didn't get the connectivity working right at
So
the beginning, but we've been going on for 2 hours and
yeah.
40 minutes now, and I'm getting quite tired myself. So I'm gonna just wrap up the conversation by saying you definitely need to see 2001: A Space Odyssey, and you need to see it and email me what you think about HAL 9000 in it. So
All
I'll
right.
just leave it
Gotcha.
there. Do you have anything that you want to say before I wrap up the stream?
No, but thank you for having me on. I love to hear different opinions. That's the only way we learn by
Well, thanks, Sean. You
conflicting views.
definitely you cause a stream to go in a much more cerebral and elevated direction than it was before. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Everyone who was watching, thanks for being here as well. That was a pretty fun stream. So hopefully I will get that debate on modern day debates going, and you guys can watch me try to debunk some silly flat earthers on there. So until then, everybody stay curious and stay learning, and have a great evening.